Chapter 874. Su Fengmian stopped here. Su Xiao waved his hand and said with a smile, "Support from both inside and outside?" Daddy was more than happy for those rotten sores and pus to leak out on their own. It was disgusting to always hide them. Some people, after all, had been through life and death for half of their lives. Father could only turn a blind eye to them. In the early years, he had promised them that as long as they did not die on the battlefield, he would take all the women, money, and official hats. Father owed the dead a lot in this life, but for those who were alive, he felt that he did not owe them much. Take Zhong Hongwu for example. The first time his father met him, he was only a sergeant. At that time, his father jokingly asked him how high he wanted to be in the future. Zhong Hongwu said that he would be satisfied if he could be a lieutenant with 700 to 800 strong brothers under his command. If he could kill anyone he didn't like, his life would be worth it. There was also Yan Wenluan, an interesting young man when he was young. He always said to me that he wanted to be a horse dealer in the future. That way, even if he died, he could die on the back of a horse. If he was a peace official who did not have to worry about food and clothing, he said he would not be willing to ride a horse in his old age. He was afraid he would die on a woman's belly. Sometimes, Father looked at those old people who were gradually getting fat and suddenly felt that he did not recognize any of them. Back then, there were brothers who dared to scold Father for being disappointing, saying that if Father was a general, he would be better than Su Xiao. There were old brothers who were willing to go crazy in the middle of the night, carrying a jar of wine and running to Father's tent to compete in drinking. There were old brothers who smiled and threatened Father that if they did not set a marriage, they would not be brothers. At that time, Li Yishan and Zhao Chongling were still there. Zhong Hongwu, Yan Wenluan, and a large group of people were not old. Chen Jibao, Yuan Zuozong, and the other children did not need to be said. At that time, Father liked to fight the most. He was never afraid of people dying. Father was not afraid. Who dared to be afraid? If you did not have the guts, then scram back to your wife to warm the bed. So as long as there was a battle to fight, they would go crazy. If there was no battle, they would shamelessly ask those officials for a battle. You want money? Father is not good at that. I will give you as much as I have. You think it is not enough? Then let's put it on credit first. Once I win the war, you can just let your men take the chests away with carriages. Military merits? That's fine, as long as you give me some leftovers. Don't treat the brothers who risk their lives too badly. As long as your descendants come to the battlefield, it'll be fine even if they're tens of thousands of miles away from the battlefield. After the war, you'll still give them a lot of military merits for free. This way, who wouldn't be willing to do business with Father? Only a fool wouldn't do it. Then, the imperial court began to know that there was a young barbarian surnamed Su who came from a poor background in Liaodong. After he made a name for himself, he was not greedy for money or achievements. He just wanted to die on the battlefield. Thus, in the end, the court officials who had a good relationship with Father were very willing to give the troops weapons, hoping that Father's military achievements would allow them to speak loudly in the court. The enemies who did not have a good relationship with Father were even more willing to say, "You, Su Xiao, are tired of living? Then you can go gnaw on the hardest bones and fight the hardest battles to the death." Afterwards, Father fought his way south. Those lofty pillars of the imperial court, the noble clans and aristocratic families who had always looked down on Father, were finally willing to open their eyes and take a look. Only then were they somewhat afraid. Unknowingly, how did that barbarian Su's troops become so majestic? Su Xiao grinned, extending a hand. 50,000 cavalry. Father used 50,000 cavalry to destroy Northern Han. That year, the young emperor of Northern Han clamored with your father, saying that the one surnamed Su was not worthy of your mother, Wu Su. He also said that your mother was blind and was not worthy of practicing the sword. Father did not argue with him. In the end, Father led 600 elite cavalry, directly charging through the gates of the imperial palace and into the throne room. That fellow was paralyzed on the dragon throne, so frightened that he wet his pants. Su Fengmian's eyes were warm as he smiled. In reality, he had long since memorized this story by heart. He had heard it so many times that he was sick of it. However, he was different from the impatience that he displayed on his face in the past. Now, as long as Su Xiao was willing to speak, he was willing to listen. Su Xiao suddenly smiled awkwardly. Clearly, he was thirsty. Waving his hand at Yuan Zuozong, who was deliberately standing far away, he said, "Go get 2 jugs of white wine. There is no need to warm it. The hotter it is, the better." Yuan Zuozong quickly returned with 2 jugs of wine, one for Su Xiao and one for Su Fengnian. After a pause, Su Xiao no longer spoke of his past. Softly, he said, "Han Xingxian is dead. Lu Hao is also dead. The only ones left are Benxi and Zhao Huangqiao. What father could not do, son has done. Father is even happier." This time, father left Bailiang not only to give Yan Wenluan and the others one last chance, but also to walk the same path as you. On the way, I went to the Jin family's mansion. I did not want to make things difficult for them. However, I heard that the old man of Jin Lanting, Jin Right Chancellor, was scared to death on the same day after knowing that father did not enter. Su Fengnian said helplessly, "You did not let them have a good new year." Su Xiao dismissed it with a smile. He looked towards the northwest and slowly said, "Father has been thinking about one thing for the past 2 years. If Northern Mang is truly determined to go south regardless of the overall situation, then in the end, how much of the family's wealth will I hand over to you?" Father had fought so many battles in his life. There were wins and losses, but he rarely won. But when he lost, it was really tragic. There were 2 times when he was almost completely wiped out. It was so tragic that no one thought that father could make a comeback. After losing the battle, I saw those young faces that were blackened by gunpowder. When they saw father, they could still smile. They did not feel that they followed the wrong person. Father was aggrieved. At that time, I swore that even if father was lucky enough to become a high-ranking official and have a son, I must let this kid go to the battlefield in the future. It was only in this way that father felt that he had not let down those soldiers and felt a bit better. But when father really did have a son, it was like when the Zhao family wanted to invite you to the capital to be their son-in-law. In truth, father had thought of agreeing. At that time, father thought that if he had to feel guilty, he should feel guilty toward father alone. When father went to the underworld, father would apologize to old brothers. In his heart, father still selfishly hoped that his son would not suffer such a fate. Then, father took some wine to Tide Listening Pavilion to drink with Ishan. "Did you know?" Ishan directly threw the wine out of the room. "It was only later when he heard that you had run off to roam the Jianghu that I went to drink with him to drown my sorrows that Ishan finally smiled. He drank so much that father could not stop him." So in the past few years, after many old generals took root in Bailiang, many fathers were heroes and their sons were cowards. When their sons caused many disasters, they had to clean up their messes. Some of them left some face and directly came to Mount Qingliang to beg for mercy. Some of them thought that I couldn't see and sneakily did even more wrong things. They killed people to silence them and eliminate them by the roots. Their methods were not inferior to those of the Spring and Autumn War. Some of them were even more direct. They thought that since father had risked his life to build his family business with Su Xiao, it was no big deal for his own son to kill a few people and bully a few women. Murder and arson became a matter of course. Why didn't they think about why they were willing to put their lives on the line to fight Su Xiao back then? Why did they not hesitate to kill officials? Su Xiao fiercely gulped down a mouthful of wine. He asked with a smile, "Father originally wanted Ishan to do some things, but Ishan said that you would not let him do it no matter what. What were your thoughts?" Su Fengnian calmly said, "You have a notorious reputation in this lifetime. Do you think you haven't been cursed enough? Only among the old generals and soldiers of Bailiang do you still have a good reputation. You're not afraid of being scolded for not cherishing old feelings, but I am." Before those new emperors ascended the throne, the previous emperors would quickly help remove the imperial schemes of those old meritorious men. Don't use them on Bailiang. If it were me, you would more or less be at ease, and I would have even less of a burden. Zhong Hongwu was just killing the chicken to warn the monkey. In the future, in Bailiang, favors are favors, and rules are rules. If anyone uses favors to break the rules with me, I will have them pack up and scram. This time, when I return to Bailiang, I will first go to the desert in the west and win over the hundreds of thousands of sinners who can mount and fight. After that, I will travel all over Bailiang's territory. I don't believe that I can't walk through Liangjiang Lake in Beimang before I can walk through my own Bailiang. Su Xiao nodded with gratification and continued to drink. Su Xiao swallowed the last mouthful of strong liquor and shook the empty flask. He said softly, "When we arrive in Bailiang, don't be in a hurry to win over the sinners' forces supported by Mount E. Accompany me to take a look at the Bailiang cavalry first, okay?" Su Fengnian bit his lip and smiled. How can a father always ask his son if he's okay? Su Xiao threw the flask into the lake and also smiled. How can a father repeatedly ask his son to go out and take risks? Su Xiao put his hands in his sleeves and looked up at the sky. He narrowed his eyes and said, "Last time, I might have been busy killing people along the way and didn't feel it. Now I know that the south is cold to the bone. Father is old." Su Fengnian silently took off his red fox fur hat and pressed it on Su Xiao's head. He gently pulled it down and covered the old man's ears. The old man moved his lips and suddenly turned around. It was as if he didn't want his son to see his old tears and his heroic past. Chapter 875. That woman who had relied on her talent to enter second place on the Rouge commentary board, the young Dejia Wang, was second only to Su Weisheng in the commentary board. However, after she wrote The First Snow in the East Wing, there was no longer any news of her. She was like a clay ox that had sunk into the sea. She no longer had the grandeur that made all the scholars and beauties in the world avoid her. It had to be known that even the Nyang in Tian's city had once read The First Snow in the East Wing, and Princess Consort Jingan, who had died for love in Xiang Fan City, was the same. On the other hand, the rotten scholar of Liyang felt as if a huge rock had been lifted from his heart. This woman had probably finally stopped using words to harm the world. Only the Wang family on Mount Laoshan of the Spring God Lake knew that in the past 2 years, their young Mrs. mind had not been on Mount Laoshan. No matter the wind or rain, no matter how heavy the snow was, she would go to the lakeside tea house to sit for a while. She would look to the east and the north without a fixed number. In the past, whenever their young miss was unhappy, she would play polo and play on the swing for a while. The swing could be as high as a 2-story building. Even the most daring men would be speechless when they saw it. But it was different now. She was reserved and always sat on the swing in a daze. Occasionally, when she realized that the swing was not moving, she would gently stand on her tiptoes. Many people in the world were looking forward to it, but Miss just ignored them. Especially now that it was winter, she talked about hibernation and slept until she was old. Other than going to the lakeside to look into the distance, she would go back to the study and read a few pages of a book. Then she would mumble that she was sleepy. The maid would grind and hand her a brush, and then she would find all kinds of excuses to be lazy. Was this still the Wang Dongxiang who dared to boast, "Before I pick up the brush, I go to see the sages, immortals, and Buddhas. After I pick up the brush, the wind is clear, the moon is clear, and the ghosts and deities come to worship me"? Was this still the Wang Dongxiang who dared to boast, "Before I pick up the brush, I go to see the sages, immortals, and Buddhas. After I pick up the brush, the wind is clear, the moon is bright, and the ghosts and deities come to worship me"? Fortunately, the old master, who had earned a lot of money, did not care about these things. Even if there were noble families of equal status who came to propose marriage, he would still refuse them one by one. In the dusk of Mount Mao, some people went down the mountain while others went up the mountain. The one who went down the mountain and boarded the ship was the richest man in Qingzhou, Wang Linquan, who had recently withdrawn from the salt and iron business behind the scenes. His eyes were brimming with tears and he was extremely excited. The one who left the ship and went up the mountain was a gray-haired young master. Unknowingly, he came to Wang Chudong's boudoir. When a maidservant saw the man with clear eyes, she did not know why her annoyance disappeared. However, it seemed that he was not like this in the past. At that time, he was wearing a white robe and a jade belt, elegant and elegant. That pair of red phoenix eyes gave people the feeling that they were filled with water. Any unmarried woman who saw him would tremble a few times. Now that she saw him again, this maidservant intuitively felt that he had changed a lot. As for what had changed, she did not know. It was just that the steward who led the way had told her that the young miss was still lazily hibernating. When the steward arrived at the gate of the courtyard, he respectfully turned back. He did not say much, but the maidservant clearly saw that when the steward was secretly sizing up the young master, the fear in his eyes was like a mouse seeing a cat. It was like a mouse seeing a tiger. When he arrived at the warm and comfortable hall, there were only 3 maidservants in the building. The other 2 also followed the sound with light footsteps. When they saw him, they were surprised to see him. He asked for a pot of spring spirit lake tea that did not have the smell of miscellaneous earth and wood. He brewed the tea himself and did not bother the maidservants. Even if the tea was often of little value, it was fragrant and clean. He did not forget to pour a cup for each of them. This made the several young girls, who were used to being close to each other, feel flattered. However, his tea brewing technique was clumsy and immature. Even if it was not bad, in the eyes of the 3 girls, they did not dare to point out. After drinking the tea, the young guest looked at the sky. A clever maidservant said that she was going to wake up the young miss. He asked if they could wait in the room. The 3 girls looked at each other and then smiled knowingly and nodded. Chapter 876. Su Fengnian, who was passing by Mount Lao to rest, gently pushed open the door and entered. A servant girl helped to close the door, and then she quietly retreated. Su Fengnian sat by the window. The afterglow of the sun shone through the window screen. Unlike the splendor of Mount Lao, this woman's boudoir was very simple and elegant. Other than the 4 treasures of the study, there were not too many miscellaneous items on the table. There was a linglong carved from an old bamboo root. Large bamboo balls encased small bamboo balls. There were about 8 or 9 balls of varying sizes. Su Fengnian's finger pressed on the linglong and moved it a few cun on the table. The sound was not loud. There was a stack of small colored paper on the table. The colors were different. There were apricot red, goose yellow, and copper green. On the top of the colored paper were 3 crooked characters, Hui Huang Ji. The last time Su Fengnian left Mount Lao, he found out that this Wang Dongxiang's talent and learning had seized the top spot in the literary circle. But the words he wrote did not seem to be of any use. Today, seeing it with his own eyes, he found out that it was really earthworms that had crawled on it. It was an unsightly sight. However, the handwriting on the small, exquisite paper under the Hui Huang Ji was still ugly. There were many broken lines and broken poems, all of which could not be underestimated. There were powerful military poems about the frontier fortress. There were also words about a hermit's bitter recitation. On the contrary, there were very few words of hidden bitterness in the boudoir. Yanji's official ranking was only based on the women's beauty. The men all had their own preferences. There were many objections to the 10 people on the ranking list. Many people said that the famous courtesan Li Baisher's ranking was too low. Others said that they had never seen that girl surnamed Nangong, so how could she have the qualifications to be ranked above Chenyu? Yanji's assistant ranking was a lot fairer. Beiliang's Junju Su Weisheng, Chunshan Lake's Wang Chudong, and the female scholar Yan Donggu, who was already the crown prince's imperial concubine, could all be considered to be on the ranking list. There were not many objections. Su Fengnian flipped through the colored paper one by one. When he finished, the order was reversed. He flipped through it again, and the Hui Huang Ji returned to the front page. After folding more than 60 colored papers, Su Fengnian leaned back in his chair and looked out the window. On Chunshan Lake, Xianyuan Qingfeng was ruthless. In one day, he killed 6 martial artists in succession. They were all famous Jianghu seniors and had almost become the common enemy of Jianghu. On the next day, no one went up the arena. On the 3rd day, 3 famous Jianghu masters went up the arena one after another. Again, their heads were smashed by Xianyuan Qingfeng. This kind of Wulin Alliance's chief made people's hair stand on end. He was definitely not the Wulin Alliance that Jianghu people admired. However, Mount Huishan's Nyodagang became famous because of this. Strangely, the more ruthless Xianyuan Qingfeng's methods were, the more the Jianghu people's curses were not one-sided. The old and new Jianghu people's perceptions were completely different. The old Jianghu people were heartbroken, while the new Jianghu people were eager to give it a try. In private, undercurrents were surging. They all said that only such a cold-blooded woman, such a chief, could have the hope of leveling Mount Zhulu. Su Fengnian did not know what Jianghu would look like in the future. Su Fengnian's thoughts drifted away. He thought of the fox fur coat that he had taken from Bailiang to the south at Shangyin Academy. If she had made up her mind, she would never have left the fox fur coat behind. But since she was unwilling to be a caged bird, Su Fengnian could only pretend to be magnanimous and go with the flow for once. If he had the chance to meet her again in the future, he wondered if she would have already become an old woman. Su Fengnian also thought of the first time he walked the Jianghu. At that time, he was at the bottom of the Jianghu, looking up at the Jianghu. There was once an unforgettable figure by the Luo River, but now she had long since faded away. The second time, he was looking down at the Jianghu from above. Su Fengnian turned his head and looked at the bed. That year, when he accompanied her on the lake to ride a turtle, Su Fengnian had never thought that today's situation would occur. He really did go to Beimang and survived. In the future, he would follow the traditional order of succession and rule over Bailiang. He would take over Su Zhao's family property and continue to draw a circle around the prison, guarding the northwest gate. The afterglow of the sun dimmed, and the twilight gradually deepened. A slap came from the bed. The young woman slapped her face hard. Her eyes were drowsy, and her face was full of shame and anger. She sat up. It turned out that countless charcoal had been used to lay the floor of the boudoir. Although the room was as warm as spring in winter, it also gave the mosquitoes the ability to hibernate and survive the winter. It was extremely annoying. The woman was fond of sleeping, and every time she had to scheme against the winter mosquitoes. The maid could not wake her up because these mosquitoes had done a great job. After the woman sat up wrapped in the embroidered quilt, she bared her fangs and brandished her claws. She chased after a winter mosquito that bit her. Resentfully, she returned without success. She could not bear the cold outside the quilt and muttered that there was actually a mosquito in the world that could escape from this heroine's lynxy finger. Then she went back to sleep with her head covered. She probably felt that it was not good to be so dispirited, so she hid in the quilt and muttered for a long time. Finally, she poked her head out and looked at the study table where the light was the brightest. It was empty, and the young girl was a little absent-minded. Some unspeakable grievances appeared in her limpid eyes. She stretched out 2 fingers and pinched her cheeks hard. Only after a moment of pain did her sleepiness disappear. She absent-mindedly got up and put on her clothes. During this time, she shrank back into the warm quilt several times. She was too lazy to wear boots and only put on her socks before she landed on the ground. She finally had the temperament of a great writer, Wang Dongxiang. She was virtuous and graceful, and her eyes were especially lively. She sat cross-legged on the chair, holding her breath and concentrating, grinding and picking up the brush. However, after just one stroke, she was defeated by her own handwriting. She felt that it was really ugly. Her heroic spirit was suddenly gone, and she sighed. Bored to death, she held her chin with one hand and prepared to flip through the colored paper. Suddenly, her eyes widened. On the page of the Huai Huang collection, there was an additional line of small characters. In addition to the current year, month, and date, there was also the 4 words, "Here is a tour." Compared to Wang Chudong's handwriting, it was naturally thousands of miles away. Wang Chudong knocked open the door. She did not bother to put on the necessary warm fur coat for going out, nor did she care about the calls of her personal maidservants. In one breath, she ran to the ferry by the lake at the foot of the mountain. Her pair of socks were covered in dirt. Wang Linquan, who loved this only daughter the most, panicked and ran down the mountain, his face full of heartache. Wang Chudong looked at the old man and said with a crying voice, "I will never sleep in the future." Wang Linquan grinned, contrary to common sense, and did not comfort her. Instead, he added insult to injury, "In the future, if you don't know how to manage the household, let's see who dares to marry you." Wang Chudong sniffled and wanted to cry but had no tears. Suddenly, she was pulled under the armpit by someone behind her. She turned around and stepped on the back of that person's shoes. That person smiled and said, "Only I would dare." Chapter 877. In the ink-black night, the two carriages drove into an inconspicuous alley. The luxurious and spacious carriage made the alley seem even narrower and narrower. As the base of the Green faction, Xiangfan City was clearly divided between wealth and nobility. Rich nobles like Wang Linquan, because they did not have a family background or scholarly achievements, even if they had a residence in the city, they did not live there for long. Nobles like the Liu family, who had a pillar of the country as their family's mainstay, hid in the city with the other families. On the two sides of the alley, their residences were almost the same size as the residences of the imperial family. As for Wang Linquan's main gate on Mount Lao, no matter how imposing it was only the residence of a rich family and could not be considered a residence. In this alley, which was called the Sheep Alley by the people of Qingzhou, there were many influential people. Other than the Liu family, the oldest of the 6 assistant ministers of the imperial court, the assistant minister of personnel, Wen Tai, and the Qingzhou general, Hong Lingshu, who held the military power of Qingzhou, lived next to each other. It was these 3 influential families of Qingzhou that supported the Green faction, which could compete with the Zhang and Gu factions in the imperial court. Unfortunately, success was due to 3 surnames, and failure was also due to 3 surnames. Following the dissension and discord of Liu Wenhong and the other 2 elders, the Green faction ceased to exist and scattered to other forces. The other influential families also scattered when the tree fell, and each of them found another branch to rely on. It was difficult to unite the people's hearts again. If someone could look closely, they would find that the threshold was in line with the status of the owner of the residence. It was much higher than that of an ordinary family. The rules here were insurmountable. People said that families of equal social status were like carps leaping over the dragon's gate. On the Sheep Alley, the Liu family's residence was the most talked about in the marketplace. When the residence was built, the 2 main gates were directly carved from a tree, which was then made into a door and transported over. Such a huge tree was destined to be too big for 2 people to wrap their arms around. It was said that the threshold of the Liu family's residence was so high that many children had to climb over it. Commoners usually had to take a detour around the sheep house lane. There was no way for them to get close to this alley, so they didn't have the ability to go to the Liu family's front door to investigate. A kind old man with snow-white eyebrows stood at the foot of the steps of the mansion's entrance. He was holding a bamboo lantern, and the candlelight was swaying slightly, illuminating the old man's kind face. 60 years old was already considered old, but the old man was actually 80 years old. Beside him, the eldest legitimate grandson was also almost 40 years old. The man had an elegant appearance and wore a gorgeous 4th-rank brocade official's robe. He was originally an upright official with a good reputation. However, as the end of the year approached, there were many affairs to attend to. These days, in addition to sitting in the yamen, he also had to visit his superiors and entertain his colleagues in the prefecture. There were also young scholars who came to ask for advice. These were all trivial matters that could not be neglected. Originally, he was supposed to stay up all night to deal with a large pile of thin documents, but the mansion's servants informed the old ancestor at the last minute that he had to rush home. Liu Dongjiang, the governor of Taishi Prefecture, had no choice but to rush home without changing out of his official robe. The future head of the Liu family looked at the end of the alley and turned his head to ask his grandfather in a low voice if he could help him carry the lantern. The old man, who used to be the backbone of the Green Party, shook his head. The old man did not tell his eldest legitimate grandson who was coming to visit in the middle of the night. Liu Dongjiang, who had been afraid of his grandfather since he was young, did not dare to say anything. This kind of reverence continued until Liu Dongjiang, who was known as Liu Jiankei, was 30 years old. It was only in these 2 years that he went to Taishi Prefecture to become the governor of the prefecture. He could barely be considered an outsider official. Only then did his attitude improve slightly. He no longer trembled every time the old man asked him face to face, afraid that the old man would look down on him. No wonder the famous scholar of Qingzhou, Lu Dongjiang, was so unmanly. It was really because his grandfather was too successful and famous. Just the fact that he formed a cabinet with the current Grand Secretary's teacher in the previous dynasty was enough to make people respect him like a god. The Lu family already had 6 generations, but everyone, without exception, lived under the protection of the old man's achievements. Perhaps only Lu Dongjiang's daughter could talk and laugh freely in front of the old ancestor. The others did not have this kind of courage. After retiring and returning to his hometown, the old man, who still had the title of pillar of the state, glanced at the mansion across the alley. It was the old man Wen Tai's mansion. Thinking about it carefully, one was in the imperial court while the other was in the wilderness. They had not seen each other for about 4 to 5 years. It was good that they did not meet each other. At least they could maintain a cordial relationship on the surface, unlike Hong Lingshu, who had to lower her head and raise her head constantly. Instead, they went further and further apart, implicating the descendants of the 2 families who had a good relationship with each other. Not long ago, they even had a big fight. It was to the extent that the matter reached the young vassal king's side. That young man also knew how to conduct himself. He did not hesitate to use his status as a vassal king to put on a posture of bearing a bramble and asking for punishment. You, the lord of Qingzhou, who was watching the fire from the other side of the river, should be punished 50 times. What crime did you commit? To be able to stay in the capital at the age of 70, often working day and night to seek peace for the emperor, he did not feel tired. At this moment, the old man truly felt a little tired. Turning his head to look at the door knocker on the door, Lu Feiqi laughed at himself. He had worked cautiously and conscientiously all his life. So many times, he had made fearful choices in exchange for this green tin knocker, which was not inferior to that of a duke or marquis. Chapter 878. Lu Dongjiang saw that his grandfather was in a rare state of decline and became increasingly uneasy. In the past few years of governing Taishi County, he didn't dare to slack off. His interactions with people were flawless. Currently, the imperial court was bold and decisive, and the imperial examinations were being promoted. Many of the scholars who had been his teacher and student had passed the imperial examinations. While Lu Dongjiang was searching his heart, the old man suddenly raised the lantern in his hand and softly said, "There is a saying that, the more you work, the more vulgar it becomes. It means that once the work is too complicated and loses its original flavor, going too far is as bad as falling short. Being a person is also a principle. No one loathes a smooth and slick person, but no one can sincerely become close friends with such a person, much less share trials and tribulations with them. If you want to get along well with someone, you have to know 1 or 2 embarrassing things about that person. Only then will you feel comfortable and at ease. In Taishi County, it's not that you didn't do well, it's that you did too well. You already outshone the trees in the forest. Our Lu family's eldest granddaughter-in-law isn't a bad person. Although she comes from a small family, after coming here, she was able to manage the household with integrity. She doesn't like you to be a womanizer, which is human nature. If you are willing to treat her with respect, that is a good thing. But because of this, you refuse to engage in social engagements, which is incompatible with the entire officialdom. Do you really think that with that little bit of reputation on the surface and 1 or 2 myriad people umbrellas when you leave office, you will be able to step on others and be promoted? You may believe that you are a good official and have a clear conscience, but your father left early. Your several uncles are also disappointing. Grandfather has helped them for most of my life, but they still haven't been able to stand up. Don't talk about putting in effort, just not being a burden is already not easy. Since you will be the head of the family in the future, it will be inevitable that you will have to act like the screen wall behind the East sect, acting independently and blocking all filth for this family. You can't take things for granted like today." The old man, who rarely spoke at length with his descendants, paused for a moment, his expression bleak. Lu Dongjiang's face was deathly pale. In the middle of winter, sweat poured down his back. The back of his official robe was soaked with sweat. Before seeing the carriage, one could smell the hooves of the horses. Lu Feiqi sighed softly and said, "Officials protect each other." These words don't sound nice, but it shows the true meaning of being an official. Now, the three families of the Green Party are like fire and water. Not only are they pursuing their own futures, but they also look down on each other. How can they go far? In this game of chess in Qingzhou, Grandpa is already powerless to reverse the situation. He has already obtained all the benefits that he should have obtained. It is very difficult to snatch anything from Wen Tai and Hong Lingshu's pockets. If Grandpa can't do it, you guys can't snatch food from the tiger's mouth either. But Grandpa can still do one thing before he dies, and that is to take you to another chessboard and sit down. There are not many pieces there, and there is a lot of space. It is not like the old chessboard, where every little thing is fought over. Even if the Lu family is not strong enough, the Lu family's descendants will not starve to death. Lu Dongjiang once had a secret meeting with the old man and Beiliang's Chu Lushan on the Spring God Lake. Although he did not participate in the conversation, with his wisdom, he was able to grasp the clues. Moreover, Lu Qingyan secretly returned to Beiliang. It was just that Lu Dongjiang did not want to think too deeply about it. Not to mention the hardships of Beiliang, the key point was that it was like a pile of eggs. Lu Dongjiang was born in peace and was used to a peaceful life. Even if his daughter could become a concubine of a feudal lord, he did not feel any glory. A moment of joy in exchange for the execution of his entire family, Lu Dongjiang was so scared that he woke up in the middle of the night several times, but he did not dare to question his grandfather's decision. As the sound of horse hooves became clearer and clearer, Lu Dongjiang gathered his courage, gritted his teeth and said, "Grandpa, on the old chessboard, even if the Lu family was declining day by day, they could still hope that a national player would appear in the future to take back their lost land. But on that chessboard that may collapse someday, no matter who the Lu family's chess player is, they will only end up losing the game. Do you really want to change it?" Lu Feiqi narrowed his eyes. Lu Dongjiang was sweating profusely, but he did not dare to wipe it away. After he said what was on his mind, his imposing manner was greatly reduced. He lowered his head and said, "It is my fault." The old man, who had never thought that he would smile in front of his eldest grandson, would laugh heartily for the first time. He patted Lu Dongjiang's shoulder and said, "Dongjiang, Grandpa has waited for this day for many years." Lu Dongjiang suddenly raised his head, his face full of disbelief. Lu Feiqi looked at the dim alley of sheep houses at the end and said with gratification, "Blindly worshipping the past is not good. It is the same as writing poems and being a person. If you don't even have the courage to say no to Grandpa in this lifetime, Grandpa will be very disappointed when he closes his eyes. The reason Grandpa favors Yen is because she is smarter and more tactful than all of you. She knows when to nod and when to shake her head. Grandpa has been in the 3 ministries in the capital all his life and has been kneeled to by so many people. Many of them are now ministers of the 6 ministries. How many words of flattery have Grandpa heard? If he goes to the capital, even Bai Yen will treat him with respect. How can Wen Tai and Hong Lingshu compare to your grandpa? Not to mention that one of them has to wag his tail and beg Zhang Julu for pity. When a person eats too much bird's nest and shark's fin, inadvertently eating a home-cooked dish will only increase their appetite. But then again, at Grandpa's age, it is inevitable that his eyesight is blurred. If you ask who is standing 50 steps away, Grandpa will definitely not be able to answer. But when looking at the current situation, Grandpa should be more farsighted than you. Besides, my gambling skills and luck have always been good. This is my last bet, the heavens will give me some face. The depression that had accumulated in Lu Dongjiang's heart for many years disappeared, and he was in high spirits. The old man smiled and said, "A fine bird chooses a good tree. I'm afraid that the tree is not reliable and changes its allegiance. I'm afraid that the building will collapse. But the atmosphere in Beiliang doesn't look like it is about to decline. It is clearly a situation where the family is becoming more and more prosperous. In the past, the branches were strong and the branches were weak, so it was not easy to climb up to them. But now, the main branch is gradually growing stronger. When Grandpa was on his way back to his hometown, he discussed the world situation with a person surnamed Huang. He said that as long as the family could withstand 2 consecutive trips to the capital, it was worth it for outsiders to bet all their assets. Grandpa deeply agreed with this, which led to tonight's meeting and the subsequent departure of the Liu family from their hometown. The descendants of the Liu family are both good and bad. In the future, there will definitely be people who will rush to Bailiang to take root and become arrogant because of yen, or status. As the head of the family, you don't need to restrict them too much. Choose a few members of the Liu family who can't take on important responsibilities and abandon them as pawns. Take the initiative to help the new Prince Liang punish the chickens to warn the monkeys. Bailiang will most likely remember this old favor. If you want the bonsai in the garden to look good, you have to cut it. You have to make a choice. There is no such thing as a good thing in the world that you can't let go of. Lu Dongjiang was both frightened and enlightened. He said, I will definitely remember this in my heart. The old man, who had been holding the lantern all this time, narrowed his eyes and did his best to look at the carriage that was gradually approaching. His original gentle tone became a little more hurried. Grandpa really hopes that in the future, when there is a political crisis, the Liu family will have an old man like Grandpa who can dispel the fog and give advice to the descendants. This is Grandpa's greatest wish. Lu Dongjiang's expression suddenly changed dramatically. He said sadly, Grandpa, you're not coming with us to Bailiang? The old man sighed and finally slowly handed the lantern in his hand to his grandson. He smiled and said, the Liu family has a new master, but someone has to give the old master an explanation. What is started must be finished. This is also a kind of sacrifice. Besides, it's the Qingming festival, and the tomb is empty. It's not right. Lu Dongjiang took the lantern, which was actually light, but it was as heavy as 10,000 caddies. After the old man handed the lantern over, he seemed to be both disappointed and relieved. He didn't turn his head. He just pointed at the eaves of the mansion behind him and said in a low voice, remember one thing. When you are under someone else's eaves, it is your duty to lower your head and do things. But don't forget to raise your head and do things. Because this is a duty that we can't abandon from the moment we were born. The old man quietly straightened his back and looked at the king of Bailiang, who was walking down from the carriage. Back then, the young general refused to admit defeat after he had used up all his capital. In order to make a comeback, he begged a group of high-ranking cabinet elders for soldiers and horses. He stood in the torrential rain from dawn to dusk. And he, Lu Feiqi, was one of the cabinet elders back then. The old man, who no longer had a lantern in his hand, slowly closed his eyes with a smile on his face. Lu Dongjiang turned pale with fright. He hurried forward to support the old ancestor of the Liu family, who was falling backward. He immediately burst into tears. The lantern in his hand fell heavily to the ground. The man died and the lantern went out. Chapter 879. Nearly 15,000 words. If you break it up, it'll be 5 chapters. But I won't play this kind of pointless trick, so I still owe 5 chapters this month. I'll pay it back slowly. P.S. This chapter can be considered a major turning point between Jianghu and the imperial court. Su Fengnian didn't expect that as soon as he got off the carriage, he would be met with such a sudden grievous news. Fortunately, the eldest grandson of the Liu family, who was his future father-in-law, wasn't a pedantic, inflexible scholar. He quickly carried the ancestor on his back and led them secretly into the mansion through a side door. The Liu family's threshold was indeed much higher than that of an ordinary official's residence. The ground inside the mansion was also much higher than the alley outside. Bypassing the specially bestowed colored glazed screen wall, they didn't take the main road. Instead, they headed west and chose one of the 6 side roads. High and noble families had rules and regulations. Not only were the eaves of the side roads a few inches lower, the courtyard gates and the ground were also a full 3 feet lower than the main road. Usually, it was the servants who walked on these side roads, so many of the eldest sons and grandsons of the powerful families, from young to old, would never walk on this side road in their entire lives. Because of the meeting with Bailiang Su Shao and his party tonight, the odd job workers were forbidden to go out after nightfall. They were even exempted from the duty of guarding the courtyard at night. However, there were many side rooms in the mansion and officials' aides who might not scrupulously abide by the rules. Xiangfan City also had an unusually large number of brothels. After Li Baisher, who was both beautiful and beautiful, left Qingzhou, the flock of phoenixes had no leader. In order to compete for the top courtesan, they spared no effort. Almost every night in Xiangfan City was filled with music and song. Fortunately, the Lu and Wen clans, which faced each other, were close to the end of the alley between the sheep houses. Many famous and debauchee, who didn't mind criticism, would enter the mansion from the other end. Old Assistant Minister Wen Tai, who held the power to promote and demote all the officials in the world, had returned home many years ago to visit his relatives and pay respects to the graves. He had cursed the foul atmosphere, and only then did the sheep house alleyway become peaceful for a period of time. When Assistant Minister Wen returned to the capital, his ignorant and incompetent great-grandson, who had not yet reached the age of 20, was the first to return home with 2 courtesans from the brothel. The alley immediately reverted to its old state and went out of control. Su Fengnian followed behind Lu Dongjiang. Although the county governor lived a life of having food and clothing at his beck and call, if he wanted to be a famous scholar, he had to be diligent. It was physically demanding work. It was not easy to eat, drink, talk, climb high, and write essays. However, the Lu family's mansion was deep. Lu Dongjiang walked in a hurry. Coupled with his absent-mindedness, he stumbled and fell to the ground. Su Fengnian picked up the lantern and followed behind him. He did not deliberately support Lu Dongjiang. Lu Dongjiang's nose was bruised and his face was swollen. He was sobbing and could not stand up. To live in this world, one had to have a certain amount of spirit to support them. Once this spirit was released, everything would come to an end. At that time outside the mansion, in order to not lose in front of Su Shao, Shang Zhugua, Lu Feiqi, had to forcefully hold on to that last breath. Originally, he was at the end of his life. However, he might still be able to hold on for 1 or 2 spring and autumn. Like boiling oil, it was quickly gone. Su Shao looked at the scholar whose head had hit the ground and sighed. Su Fengnian walked over and squatted down. He stuffed the bamboo lantern into Lu Dongjiang's hands and carried the old man's body on his back. Lu Dongjiang sat on the ground. His face was pale. He wiped his tears and stood up. He hesitated for a moment. In the end, he did not speak and walked forward silently. Lu Dongjiang said softly, "The old ancestor has left." Lu Qingyan stood at the door of the side courtyard. When she saw this scene, she covered her mouth and did not dare to cry out. In front of Su Shao and Su Fengnian, Lu Dongjiang still had to do his best to maintain the bearing of an aristocratic son. His lips trembled when he saw his daughter's pitiful appearance. He leaned against the wall with one hand. On the contrary, Lu Qingyan, who had just received the bad news, suppressed her sobbing and comforted her father gently. "Father, the old ancestor has died of old age." A few days ago, he told Yen that he knew he did not have much time left. If the old ancestor's spirit in heaven saw us unable to recover from this setback, he would not be able to rest in peace. Lu Dongjiang nodded. He used his sleeve to wipe his face. He wiped it again and again. For a long time, he did not turn his head to look at anyone. Su Shao said calmly, "Minister Lu did not live a sullen life. There are only a few people in the entire imperial court who have the good fortune to be able to retire unscathed from a high official position. This king has always been critical of the ministers of the previous dynasty. After he became a general and was conferred the title of king, he would always criticize them whenever he met them. However, he did not have any complaints towards Minister Lu. After all, Lu Qingyan could still force a smile. She invited everyone into the yard. Hearing this, Lu Dongjiang secretly cried again. He looked down at the lantern and was a little confused. Originally, Lu Dongjiang thought that after his grandfather's advice, he was already a different person from the county chief of Taishi Commandery. After his grandfather left, he immediately returned to his original state. In addition to the father and son of the Su family, there was also Yuan Zhuozong, the famous general of the Spring and Autumn Cavalry War who was not unfamiliar to Lu Qingyan. There were also Han Laozhan and Su Yanbing, the two close retinues of the king of Bailiang. However, there was one person that made Lu Qingyan's pupils shrink. She recognized the young woman. She was Wang Dongxiang of Laozhan Mountain. Her father, Wang Linquan, was once a soldier of the general. At dawn the next day, Su Fengnian, who had not slept the whole night, quietly went out of the mansion from the back door. He took Yuan Zhuozong to Yongzi Alley. The men of sacrifice secretly followed them as usual. Su Fengnian walked in the alley and smiled slowly. Brother Yuan, letting Lu Qingyan be the concubine of Bailiang is to win over the Lu family and lay a foundation for the scholars to die in the cold. Even if we buy a horse worth 100 gold at a high price, it will also be mutually beneficial. I don't have any burden on this marriage. However, involving Wang Chudong is not only because the Wang family's financial resources cannot be underestimated, but also to stabilize the morale of the old soldiers. Aren't we too Philistine? Yuan Zhuozong said indifferently, the Su family and the Wang family are willing to be beaten and the other is willing to be beaten. It is even more so for His Highness and the woman surnamed Wang who likes His Highness. It is not Philistine. Moreover, if it were not for Lu Qiuer's support, the Wang family would not have today's wealth. Su Fengnian came to a wall in Yongzi Alley. The first time I came to Xiangfan City, I saw the scene of the six-pearl bodhisattva leading thousands of ghosts out of the city. Later on, he met the blind chess player Lu Su here. At that time, he left in a hurry and did not believe in his luck. In addition, he did not believe that chess skills had anything to do with governance. In the end, he missed the opportunity to meet this hidden genius strategist. Now, he regretted it so much. If I had known that this guy was a romantic figure who could write the 2 essays and 14 strategies, I would have tied him up and brought him to Bailiang. Yuan Zhuozong smiled, that's Philistine. Su Fengnian laughed involuntarily. Su Fengnian sighed, after Lu Feiqi's death, the Lu family has to delay for a while. That's nothing. I'm just worried that trouble will arise and things will get complicated. Yuan Zhuozong said calmly, that's why Lu Qingyan kept the funeral a secret. She only said that the ancestor of the Lu family was sick. This woman is not simple. Su Fengnian smiled bitterly and said, seeing how she settled the Wang girl with just a few words, she vaguely has the demeanor of a first wife. Also, when she was in the Wudong courtyard, I knew that this woman was not simple. I don't know who can suppress her in the future. Yuan Zhuozong nodded seriously, the princess candidate should be decided as soon as possible. Su Fengnian hugged his hands and exhaled a breath of mist. He squinted and smiled. Before going to Beimang, I talked with Su Shao. At that time, I naively thought that it was not impossible to pinch my nose and marry Yan Wenluan's granddaughter. Now, I finally feel relieved. She looks like her father, rougher than a strong man. That's not all. But her temper is very bad. Just thinking about it makes me scared. Yuan Zhuozong smiled slightly. Su Fengnian walked slowly along the alley. I heard that Gu Daju's adopted son, Yuan Tingshan, killed a Vajra realm master in the north with Nanhua saber, the head of the talisman saber. Tuoba Chunsun of Beimang also killed a Xian finger realm master in Vajra realm. Every dog has its day. If you meet them now, you will be chased by them for 10 blocks. Yuan Zhuozong said, Your Highness, Gu Jiantang became the Minister of War because of his saber skills. But because of his saber skills, he can't go further in the court. He is too arrogant. As a general, he is almost invincible in war. But as an official, he is barely satisfactory. The problem is that Gu Jiantang knows that he is not as good as his adoptive father, but he can't change his character. If he does, it will damage his cultivation. Su Fengnian turned his head and smiled. Brother Yuan, are you reminding me that I can't have the best of both worlds? If I want to be a good king of Bailiang, I shouldn't be obsessed with martial arts. Yuan Zhuozong nodded solemnly. Su Fengnian was silent. When they were about to turn out of Yongzi Alley, he suddenly said, Brother Yuan, you probably know my temperament. Sometimes I can't change my mind. If I go the wrong way, no one will be willing to blame me. You must remind me. If you can't persuade me, you must hit me to wake me up. Yuan Zhuozong still said meticulously, it's difficult. Your Highness will be the king of Bailiang in the future. Even if I dare to offend you, I'm afraid that your Highness will not let me kill the enemy. It's really a helpless thing. Brother Yuan, can you not be so serious when you tell a joke in the future? It's difficult. Brother Yuan, I'm helpless right now. When the two walked out of the alley, their sight suddenly became clear. There were many hawkers selling food along the street. They would not get up early if there was no profit. The king, the general, and the servants were all the same. Su Fengnian looked at the gradually bustling street and said softly, in fact, Lu Dongjiang and Lu Qingyan also know that if it weren't for the lieutenant who was humble under the eyes of the cabinet, Su Shao, the king of Bailiang, whose power is far above the Lu family, the old ancestor of the Lu family had already used up his remaining energy and spirit, he wouldn't have died so hastily. If it's the Su family who forced Lu Feiqi to death, it's not wrong to put the blame on us. I'm afraid that Lu Qingyan can endure this resentment, but Lu Dongjiang may not be able to. It's difficult for an upright official to solve a family dispute. If there is a time when he puts righteousness before family, he will be in a difficult position. Chapter 880. Yuan Zhuozong said with a smile, it's not a big deal for Chu Lushan to be the villain in the future. The Lu family will definitely not be convinced. Why not let Yuan Zhuozong be the villain? Then they will be convinced. Su Fengnian shook his head. Su Fengnian rubbed his cheeks. Huang Longshi, Sun Ping, my master, Yuan Benshi, Nalan Yusi, Zhang Julu, and Lu Feiqi who passed away yesterday have all added color to the scholars in the world. Brother Yuan, you probably don't count. I, Lu Su of Yongzi Alley, Chen Shiliang, and Su Beiji of aristocratic family, no matter if they have hatred or not, they can only watch the backs of these gentlemen go further and further away. I don't know if there will be younger scholars coming to see our backs in the future. Yuan Zhuozong rarely showed his melancholy in front of others. At this moment, he sighed undisguised. You said Chu Lushan is smart, but even the blind can't see his flattery to his highness. How smart can such a person be? But if you say Chu Lushan is stupid, he has the ability to make a rhyme. His poems and songs are natural. Only Chen Jibao can be better than Chu Lushan in terms of talent for generals and soldiers. I used to dislike Chu Lushan very much because I thought he was not popular. Now I am a little better, but I think I will not confide in him in my life. But Yuan Zhuozong thinks that such a person can be called a teacher. I don't know what he and Chen Jibao want. Yuan Zhuozong wanted to say something but stopped. When he was about to say something, Su Fengnian had trotted to buy a tray of steamed buns from the hawker. Yuan Zhuozong smiled. Well, he was not used to flattering words. Yuan Zhuozong wanted to say that although His Highness could not be a teacher, one day, his back will be the front of the Central Plains. All the people will look to the north. Wei's county in Ningzhou was a county. According to the law of Liang, there could be 2 county officers. Wei's county was remote. The people there were tough and difficult to tame. If there was any trouble in the world, there would be refugees running around and living in the mountains and forests. Liang attached great importance to the horse administration, which had been implemented in Lianhui and other places for many years. Ningzhou was barren and far inferior to other places, so it was originally not suitable to raise horses. However, as one of the 13 old provinces of Liang, Ningzhou was selected from among the short ones and was also included in the horse administration. During the spring and autumn period, almost the entire province raised horses, which could be considered to have made great contributions to the Zhao family. Most of the high officials at the prefecture level were promoted to become officials in the capital. However, the people in Ningzhou were in dire straits, leaving behind a mess that was riddled with holes. Until now, there were still thousands of horse bandits in Ningzhou. The horse problem was the most serious one in the imperial court. The year before last, a county governor was appointed, but his head was cut off by dozens of horse bandits in Yangchang Slope, which was the crossroads between the north and the south. His official uniform and official seal were scattered all over the ground, which shocked the imperial court. The emperor of Zhao family was furious. He sent a minister of the Ministry of War, who was a member of the imperial family, to lead 800 elite soldiers to suppress the bandits. They won one battle after another and beheaded more than 100 bandits. Later, they were impeached by the imperial censor. Only then did the imperial court know that horse bandits were cunning. The minister could not find any trace of the bandits, so he had to collude with the local officials and replace the bandits with prisoners on death row. Among them, there were 16 innocent people. The minister was executed on the spot. The 2 captains and the 800 elite soldiers were exiled to Liaodong. It's better to be a small official in another state than a high official in Ningzhou. The difficulty of Ningzhou's governance could be seen. There were many rules for a scholar to be an official. It was okay to be a county magistrate. Although his rank was low, he was still in charge of politics. There was hope for promotion. However, if he became a county governor, he would become a joke. As for being a county governor in Wuze County, which was close to Yangchang Slope in Ningzhou, it was really a tragedy that would make the family sad and the enemy happy. One of the 2 county governors in Wuze County had always been empty. The old county governor, Yan Huasheng, was from the county next to Wuze County. He was addicted to alcohol. He was quite capable of flattering the county magistrate and the chief clerk, drinking and having fun together, and flattering the county governor. However, if he was asked to suppress bandits, it would be asking for his life. Yan Huasheng was not good in the county official evaluation every year, but he had always been a county governor. In Yan Huasheng's words, if anyone was willing to come to Wuze County to replace this *T official, he would put the official hat on that person's head without saying anything. He would even give a thumbs up and praise that person for being a good man. However, at the end of the year, Yan Huasheng did not lose his position. Instead, a strange young man with the surname Song came to Wuze County and became his colleague with the same rank, and salary. He brought a horse, a page, and a box of scriptures with him. Yan Huasheng discussed it with the county magistrate and the chief clerk. They felt that this young man did not look like an official who inherited his father's shadow. If he had a family background, who would be willing to come to Wuze County to suffer? He should not be someone from the capital or someone who passed the Jinshe exam. According to the usual practice, if an official outside the capital was not promoted, it would be tantamount to banishment. After thinking it over, the 3 old foxes in the officialdom all felt that this young man was a poor young man who started his career by relying on his poetry and literary talents. This was because the young man with the surname Song had a good hand in writing, which belonged to the style of the 2 masters in one family that was popular in Liang imperial court. Even a boorish man who did not know a single word would feel good when he saw it. Moreover, this young man was born white and clean, and his skin was even more tender than a woman's. Yan Huasheng did not think that this young man would be able to gain a foothold in Wuze County, so he did not bother to ostracize him. As long as he could not bear the hardships, he would definitely be fired. However, Yan Huasheng soon complained incessantly. This young man with the surname Song was really addicted to being a county magistrate. As soon as he arrived at the county magistrate's office, he would bring out a pile of geographical maps that were heavier than books. Moreover, every few days, he would ask him about the distribution of horses in Wuze County. If this young man did not know the ways of the world, humbly ask for advice and give him face every time, and did not forget to bring a pot of high-quality apricot blossom wine every time, the hot-tempered Yan Huasheng would have already glared and cursed at this young man. When winter came, even the small places were particular about the poverty of small places. County Magistrate Yan and the local nobles of Wuze mostly wore fox fur robes, mink outerwear, and mink hats. The rich people of the county gathered here because they had no choice but to do so. Other than Wuze County, there was no safe place. When outsiders first entered this place, most of them mistakenly thought that it was a peaceful and prosperous place. The county magistrate's grievance drum had long been worn out. Even if someone wanted to beat it, they could not find a drumstick, let alone make a sound. In the hall, there were 2 storehouses for East money and West grain. The weapons in the storehouse were rusty. The reason why the few spears were not rusty was because they were used by the soldiers of the county magistrate's office. When they saw a dog on the street, they would knock it out and drag it back to the magistrate's office to eat dog meat. Then, they would raise money to buy a few pots of wine. The entire magistrate's office could smell the fragrance of the wine. Naturally, the few officials would not be interested in this kind of food that could not be eaten at a banquet. However, the young official who was given the nickname of Little Song County Magistrate once followed the fragrance and found a group of stunned shrimp soldiers and crab generals. Then, he sat down calmly and did not stand on ceremony. He ate meat and wine with his subordinates. After that, he left a bag of copper coins, saying that if there was dog meat to eat next time, he would pay for the wine. This made the group of miscellaneous officials immediately smile. This Little Song County Magistrate was a good person. It did not matter whether he was an honest official or not. They were too lazy to think about it. However, he would definitely be a good official who was easy to deal with. The magistrate and the registrar who lived in the back of the county magistrate's office had been watching coldly from the sidelines. After waiting for more than 10 days, they saw that the new county magistrate did not have the intention to touch the money and grain. He also did not want to make 3 rounds of fire for a new official. He did not want to make a mess in the county where there were so many rich playboys. The 2 officials were relieved and became closer to this new colleague who was unfortunately transferred to Wuzhe. Although he was still somewhat reserved and arrogant, he would at least smile when they met and exchange a few words of greeting. There was originally a residence in the back of the county magistrate's office. The house and courtyard occupied a large area. However, it had long been occupied by the brother-in-law of the county magistrate and refused to move. The county magistrate saw that Little Song County Magistrate had been silent and did not hear any gossip. It should be known that although a sparrow was small, it had all the essentials. There were so many small ears and gossips in the county magistrate's office that it could not hide any secrets. This made the county magistrate very relieved and felt a little guilty for the first time. He took the initiative to set up a bridge and rented a house for Little Song County Magistrate in a quiet place in the nearby county magistrate's office. The young man did not refuse, nor did he mention the rent. Instead, he carried the etiquette of a junior and paid a very grand visit. He called the county magistrate's wife, who was in her early 40s, sister-in-law. He called the woman who was known for being mean until her bones were lighter. He pulled the handsome young man's sleeve and asked about his well-being. The county magistrate, who was used to romance, did not care. In order to leave Ningzhou, Magistrate Liu of the neighboring county generously let his beautiful wife open her collar and let the county magistrate reach his hand in. It was called charcoal fire for warmth. How could it be compared with natural breast warmth? Unfortunately, the county magistrate was very impartial and still let another county magistrate go to the neighboring county. However, Magistrate Liu did not draw water with a bamboo basket. It was said that in the end-of-year political performance evaluation, a county magistrate who had been in the middle would have a high grade. There was also a postscript which said that the county magistrate had a strong character and integrity. The county magistrate of Wuzhe was not surprised by this kind of thing. He only felt that this foreign boy was somewhat interesting. He was so experienced that he did not seem like a young official at this age. If the young man surnamed Song came to live a peaceful life, then everyone would gather firewood to give him a peaceful life. If he dared to stir up the water, then don't blame the local snake for biting the dragon that crossed the river to death. Fortunately, the young man surnamed Song and named Kelly was very clever, so Wuzhe County was still a happy situation. Chapter 881. Commandant Xiao Song didn't seem to be particularly diligent in government affairs. He often took his delicate and pretty page to ride out of the city to admire the snow, leaving early in the morning and returning late at night. Most of the time, he begged for food from the woodcutters and hunters in the countryside. He just had to make do with it. The military officers of the 6 branches of the county yamen all said that although Master Song was a scholar, he didn't have the finicky temperament of a scholar. After spending a month together, a few of the old ruffians who had no one to rely on discussed it with. They brought good wine, good meat, and a few new fox furs to the residence of the new commandant. Within a few days, these ruffians began to take a dozen or so of their trusted brothers to openly take up the job of guarding the largest brothel in the city. The ruffians, who had been taken over by a turtle-dove, flew into a rage out of humiliation. Even the women in Wusa County were valiant. Everyone had connections with the 7 or 8 ants in the mountains and forests, so there was no saying that the people didn't fight with the officials. The two sides fought on the street. If this kind of dispute was handled in the past, the county yamen would let the officials settle the matter, and then each of them would find their parents' backers to sit down and drink wine, eat meat, give gifts, and talk about friendship. Whoever's backer had more weight would win. However, it was true that Commandant Xiao Song was easy to talk to, and he was quite protective of his own people. He waved his hand and ordered the brothers of the torture chamber to hold spears and put on armor to support the barracks. Although these guys looked no different from bandits without their official skins, their helmets were crooked and their spears were rusty. When Commandant Xiao Song ordered them around, he didn't have the habit of moving his mouth or running his legs off like a military officer. Without another word, he took out the salary that he had just received and gave it to the torture chamber. As a result, the ruffians, who didn't have the advantage in numbers, were beaten until they cried for their parents. There were countless onlookers on the noisy street, and they all felt that the scene was new. Although many people felt that the new commandant was jackals of the same lair as the old officials, and they sneered in their hearts, after all, the whole city knew about Commandant Xiao Song's reputation. Later, a local ruffian who was a disciple of a big gang in Ningzhou came out in person. He wrapped a knife in cotton cloth and swaggered through the streets. The underlings encouraged him and threatened that their big brother would go to the house to ask for an explanation. However, after this hero, who was nicknamed Desperate Lulang in Wusa County, entered the house, 2 hours later, he came back drunk and smelled of alcohol. He held a bamboo skewer in his mouth and sliced meat. When others asked him about it, he just smiled and did not say anything. 3 days later, everyone suddenly realized that the officials and bandits were in the same nest. Lulang was recruited into the torture chamber by the county commandant and became a small leader. He did not take away anyone's position. Instead, it was the county commandant who added another position. As a result, not only did the people of Wusa County know about the young official surnamed Song's family, but they also knew that this guy's table manners were very ugly. Unexpectedly, County Commandant Song overstepped his authority. The county commandant and the old county commandant did not say anything. Only the close relatives of the two families knew that the county commandant, who liked to be elegant, had a new calligraphy and painting hanging in his house. Master Yan's son, who was an ordinary scholar and was the county commandant next door, somehow wrote a response essay for the county commandant. This was a rare scene of newlyweds in the officialdom. Wusa County Commandant Song had no choice but to start paying attention to this young county commandant Song. As it was nearing the end of the year, there was an endless stream of rich people who went to the house to send gifts. Song did not refuse any of them. Just the gifts he received were enough to make him a fortune. However, everyone knew that these gifts were not for nothing. Favors should be returned. In the future, they would have to return them one by one. If they did not return the favor, they would be breaking the rules. Even if it was a light punishment, they still did not know the rules. Although Wusa County Commandant was a small county, there were many trivial matters. Song Kelly was a secondary 9th-rank county commandant and an official who specialized in dealing with troublesome matters. He would be in for a lot of trouble in the future. However, the situation was quickly broken. It was so fast that it could be said that it was like a sudden clap of thunder. The registrar official, who had always been aloof from worldly affairs, took the initiative to make things difficult for the new county commandant. Not only did he make things difficult for the new county commandant, he also made the brothel personnel lose their status. It was shocking. Several wives whose husbands used to work in the brothel were happy when they earned money and praised County Commandant Song for being a straightforward man. They even wanted to introduce local beauties to him to warm his bed. However, after their husbands lost their positions, they immediately became shrews. One shrewish woman even threw feces and urine at the door, saying that she wanted to bring bad luck to County Commandant Song for the coming year. The 6th branch of the county government also quickly changed their course and kept a respectful distance from County Commandant Song. The house was also taken back by the owner with a straight face, saying that he would not rent it no matter how high the price was. The new county commandant Song was not angry at all. He cleaned up a side room in the back hall of the county government, close to the stables. However, the horse dung piled up several feet high and no one cleaned it, so he had to clean it up with his errand boy. The county commandant and the registrar official narrowed their eyes and watched the show from a distance. They were calm when they saw Song Kelly stinking, but the errand boy was crying non-stop. The two masters looked at each other and smiled. At first, the county commandant's wife felt some pity. In fact, she felt that it was a pity that she could no longer take advantage of that elegant and handsome boy. After being scolded by the county commandant and being told the inside story, she realized the severity of the matter. It turned out that Brother Song was a descendant of a big family in the capital. His specific background was not detailed and it was very difficult to investigate. It seemed that even the registrar official, who was the second most powerful person in Wusa County, did not know about it. However, the registrar official's teacher said that there was an official in Ningzhou who could not be offended. He had long disliked County Commandant Little Song's family. He had to teach this poor boy a lesson, no matter how despicable he was. In the smelly stable, Song Kelly smiled and wiped the tears of his study companion. The 14 or 15-year-old study companion wanted to say something but could only cry, as if he had been greatly wronged. County Commandant Little Song still went out of the city when he wanted to enjoy the snow. When he was not in the mood for leisure, he would study behind closed doors. However, the leader of the local ruffians, who had also been dragged to the bottom, went to visit the county government. On the day before New Year's Eve, except for the busy families of the officials, there was no more business for the 6th branch. On such a festive morning, a group of knights entered the city at dawn, with more than a dozen large cloth bags hanging on the backs of their horses. The city guards saw that it was County Commandant Little Song leading the group and did not bother to interfere. There were nearly 100 people in the military torture chamber. Among them, more than a dozen people who were really in charge were called to the government office by the new commandant, who said that they would not have to work in the future if they did not go. There were very few people who responded. Who would take this guy who was even worse than a chicken seriously? Only those who tried to burn the stove or those who were too timid went to the prison, and then they were all dumbfounded. There were more than a dozen burly men hanging on the prison rack. 3 or 4 of them were wanted murderers who had been listed on the city's bandit list. They were being privately tortured by outsiders who were not in the torture chamber. There was a big basin in the prison with a burning charcoal fire. County Commandant Little Song was sitting on a small bench, expressionless. He stretched out his hands to warm the fire, and from time to time, he picked up the fire tongs and fiddled with the charcoal fire. He was indifferent to the heart-wrenching wails. More than a dozen brothers of the military torture chamber who had caught up with this horrible scene during the New Year looked at each other in dismay, and a few of them squatted in the corner and vomited. A few young ruffians, who had frightened Ningzhou, could not bear the tragic punishment and spat out the nests of several ruffians. The leader of the ruffians, who was most enthusiastic about the execution, turned his head and grinned at County Commandant Little Song. His white teeth were eerie, and everyone in the torture chamber felt their hair stand on end. County Commandant Little Song seemed to be unsatisfied. He gently spat out the word, "continue," and then stopped talking. He picked up a string of brass bells from the edge of the charcoal basin. Ningzhou's ruffians had 2 bells, and the warhorses had brass bells. Before charging into the battlefield to kill people, there would be a whistling arrow as a demonstration. This elegant scholar, who should have gone to the brothel to listen to foxy women playing the zither and singing, lowered his head and narrowed his eyes, turning the brass bells with 2 fingers. The county government was not small, but the movement here was too big. Those families were disturbed by the wails and howls coming from the prison, especially the beautiful concubines and children, who were so scared that they hugged each other and cried. The old Commandant Yan Huasheng came aggressively to denounce County Commandant Little Song. As a result, he happened to see County Commandant Little Song's indifferent face, which suddenly seemed very strange. The old commandant, who had a lot of blood on his hands, was speechless for a moment. County Commandant Little Song ignored Yan Huasheng. He put down the string of brass bells, picked up a piece of hot charcoal with a pair of tongs, and slowly got up. He walked towards a famous and strong horse bandit. The man was already covered in blood, but his eyes were still cold and sharp. He looked fiercely at County Commandant Little Song. County Commandant Little Song chuckled and said, "At the end of the year, this year's debt will be paid back this year. The people who owe the debt will pass the new year's difficulty. That's why there is the saying of the end of the year. You didn't study, so you probably couldn't study even if you wanted to when you were young. Perhaps you don't understand this principle, and this can't be blamed on you. However, it's right and proper to pay with one's life for one's life. I'll give you one last chance. As long as you tell me the nest of any of the 14 ruffians in Ningzhou, I'll let you die more comfortably." The old commandant swallowed a mouthful of saliva. How could this kind of execution be reasonable? Since they had become ruffians, especially those who had worked hard to make a name for themselves and had families to feed, they had no choice but to be extremely loyal. It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to make them speak. Moreover, if one was caught, even if they received the reward, they probably wouldn't have the life to spend it. There were dozens of Ningzhou commandants, and there was no lack of previous examples of ruffians who had entered the city in disguise and killed their entire families. In the future, everyone would turn a blind eye. It was good to be an official, but one had to be alive. The ruffian was indeed unyielding. He spat out a mouthful of blood on County Commandant Little Song's face. The leader of the ruffians was about to teach this strong man a lesson. Unexpectedly, County Commandant Little Song waved his hand and said indifferently, "Pry open his mouth." The ruffian's mouth was pried open by the two men. County Commandant Little Song raised the tongs and slowly squeezed the charcoal into the ruffian's mouth. There was an ear-piercing sizzling sound in the prison. Even the old Commandant Yan Huasheng felt a chill run down his spine and wanted to vomit. Without waiting for the ruffian to die, County Commandant Little Song turned to pick up the charcoal and walked to the next bandit. "I forgot to say earlier, but after you tell me, Wuza County Commandant Song Kelly, promise that after you die, if you have a family, I will protect your family and keep them safe." Chapter 882. The horse-faced man hesitated, but he didn't have to pry open his mouth. Junior Commandant Song, who had always been a patient person, directly used the poker to poke the middle-aged man's mouth. There was no chance for him to speak. Pulling out the poker, Junior Commandant Song turned around to pick up the fire again. The third man, who was approached by this evil man, was scared out of his wits. He immediately said in a trembling voice, "I'll tell you everything." Song Kelly frowned and then said softly, "I suddenly don't want to hear anymore. I'll be able to find those lairs if I spend some time and effort. In fact, you deserve to die. Blame the world and the officialdom. You're nothing." The man who could still laugh sinisterly after enduring several tortures sobbed and said, "Sir, I beg you. As long as you can protect my family, I will tell you everything I know about the two places that are the biggest names in the world. I'm begging you." Song Kelly threw away the poker. The page boy who had been crying in the stables had been silently taking notes. At this moment, he trotted over and squatted in front of the horse with the paper in his hand. He laid the paper flat on his knees. When he looked up, his eyes were cold and hard, showing no signs of weakness. Song Kelly sat back on the small stool next to the brazier and pointed at the leader of the ruffians who had only been violent in Wuza County. He turned to Yan Huasheng and smiled. "Commandant Yan, Xiao, and Brother Shihu were out enjoying the snow when they ran into this group of horses. They were tied up and brought back to the county yamen. It's almost the new year. I didn't want to trouble the brothers in the torture chamber too much, but I was also afraid of being labeled as a criminal, so I asked you to come and take a look. But tomorrow, the bodies of these bandits will be hung on the city wall, so I'll have to trouble the torture chamber. Also, I'm guessing that many of the famous horses are actually in the city. Who knows, they might have some connections with some of the esteemed lords in the city. When the detailed list comes out later, I'm afraid that I'll need Commandant Yan's help to pass on the message that Song Kelly has just arrived in Wuza County and is embarrassingly short of money. Therefore, he can only burn this list. Treat it as a gift for the villagers. Harmony breeds wealth, and everyone will have a good new year. Commandant Yen, will it trouble you? Yen Huasheng shook his head like a rattledrum. It's no trouble at all. Chief Song had returned to being a gentle and refined scholar. He said with a pleasant expression, I've also informed Chief Yen that Song Kelly will not be spending the new year at the county yamen. He has already asked Brother Sherhu to rent a small house on Taoran Street. Yen Huasheng, who originally thought that he was about to stir up trouble again, felt his heart tighten. However, when he heard that it was such a small matter, he felt relieved. He immediately squeezed out a smile and said, It's fine, it's fine. I'll pay Commandant Song a visit later. If the New Year's Eve dinner isn't ready, I have a chef that I know. His culinary skills aren't bad, and he's ranked among the top in Wusa County. I'll have him cook for Commandant Song tomorrow. With the horse gang's good start, the prison finally quieted down. The errand boy wrote quickly and finished recording. Without waiting for his master to say anything, he took out a piece of paper and wrote a relatively simple list. After he finished writing, he blew on the ink gently and handed it to the old commandant, who had a complicated expression on his face. Commandant Xiao Song slowly stood up. Everyone in the torture chamber took a few steps back in fright. Chief Song said softly, Today's matter can be considered a confidential matter between the county yamen and the torture chamber. Brothers, just take it seriously. The group of people nodded vigorously. Only then did Chief Song look at Yen Huasheng. See Chief Yen off. Yen Huasheng hurriedly said, No need. However, Song Kelly still saw him off to the gate of the prison. When he turned back, there were only a few trusted brothers who had exchanged their lives with Brother Sherhu, as well as a handsome young errand boy who impressed Brother Sherhu. Brother Sherhu looked at him inquiringly. Song Kelly nodded. There was a burst of unwilling and hurried howls in the prison. After that, it was completely silent. Standing in the stinking room full of corpses, Song Kelly asked, Can you really find 40 or so clean bandits in Jianghu? Brother Sherhu rubbed his hands and chuckled. Don't worry, Chief Song. Although I don't have many connections in Ningzhou, they are very reliable. Those people were originally outlaws with similar moral integrity. Back then, I accidentally saved their leader, so they owe me. Besides, I don't want them to work for free. As long as they are paid well, they will even try to kill their way into the government office, let alone killing horse gang in the mountains for rewards. Other places would never dare to do this, but Ningzhou is different. Officials are not bosses, but bandits are. Song Kelly nodded and smiled. Don't worry. In the future, whether there is 1 or 2 commandants in Wusa County, there will be a seat for you. Brother Sherhu shook his head and smiled. Getting an official position and showing off is another matter. The main thing is to work for you, Chief Song. In one word, it is delightful. Not long ago, a wandering fortune teller told me that the great benefactor in my life would be surnamed Song. Damn it, he didn't lie to me. At that time, I was not willing to give him a reward. Now I feel very guilty. Song Kelly did not comment. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. Brother Sher, do you want to stay up late with me? Brother Sherhu said casually, that would be great. After Brother Sherhu and the others left, only Song Kelly and the young attendant were left in the prison. Song Kelly looked at a corpse and said to himself, There are many troublesome things that have to be dealt with at the root. It is difficult to do, but someone has to do it. If it is done well, the worst case scenario is that no one in Ningzhou will be willing to be a horse gang in the future. You have to die. Someone has to do it, and someone has to die. The attendant asked softly, Young master, with your skills, why would you need to use the grassy stone tiger to deal with these dozen or so bandits? Even if you go to a horse gang's nest, you can kill your way in and out a few times. Song Kelly smiled gently. Rules are the most important. If you don't follow the rules in everything and try to take shortcuts, you will provoke opponents who are even more unruly than you. There is an old saying that it is difficult to not get your shoes wet if you walk by the river. This is the reason. If you do things in the martial world, your shoes will get wet sooner or later. A rank 3 expert was killed by a rank 2 master, a master was killed by a rank 1, a Vajra was killed by a Xian finger, and a Xian finger was killed by a heavenly elephant. Everything has its weakness. No one can escape. Since I am an official, it is like watching the martial world on a boat. The difficult part is that I can't rely on luck. The difficult part is that I can't get off the boat and walk by the river. For example, the Chief Minister Liang Luan is targeting me because he is an official. He didn't break any rules, so I, Song Kelly, will accept it. If I can't, it means that my cultivation is not good enough. I can only endure it. If I can accept it, it means that I have a firm foothold in Wusa County. I can slowly work my way up. Killing bandits is the duty of a captain. Because I didn't break any rules, my path to promotion will not be narrowed. The errand boy pouted and sighed, "Young master, but you are only at the 9th level of secondary class now. How many years will it take for you to become an important official of the 3rd level of secondary class like your master?" Song Kelly knocked on the young man's head. His eyes were warm as he scolded, "I just told you the word accumulation, and you already forgot?" The young man nodded and smiled. The young man suddenly said softly, "That sure who is so stupid." He didn't see that the fortune teller was young master in disguise. Song Kelly, who had already started a series of meticulous plans in Wusa County, laughed it off. Song Kelly asked the young man to sit on a small stool while he squatted casually and reached out to warm himself. He murmured, "It seems that someone in the capital knows that I am here and has started to do something. It is strange that no one has helped the Song family in their hour of need. However, the Song family is already in such dire straits. Why would someone still care about a mere captain? The Song family has always attracted attention in the past few years. They have never made enemies in the official circle, but they have made many enemies in the literary circle. However, these enemies still care about their reputation. Could it be that there are people around them who take the initiative to curry favor with these literary heroes who don't care about worldly affairs? Otherwise, there is something wrong with this gust of cold wind." Song Kelly stopped tapping his forehead and grabbed the string of copper bells. He said self-mockingly, "I won't think about it if I can't figure it out. I heard that the princess almost blocked young master's way when he left the capital. Love is long and the hero is short. It is useless to think too much. I don't have the right to think about it. But young master still needs to start a family. Of course. It is not bad to find a virtuous woman in Wusa County. How can this be? Why not? How can they be good enough for young master?" After saying this, the attendant's eyes turned red. He sobbed and said, "Young master is the young phoenix of the Song family. He was supposed to be the leader of the scholars in the world." Song Kelly smiled gently and wiped the young man's tears. Chapter 883. Jean San Lang, whose every movement could affect the capital's view, began to grow a beard. In reality, with his age, which had just crossed the threshold of 30, unless he wanted to imitate Grand Secretary Zhang and become that beautiful bearded duke, there was originally no need for him to grow a beard. However, after he became the Imperial College's Right Chancellor and was able to work together with the current great scholar of Confucianism, Yao Baifeng, Jean Lanting felt that there was a need to grow a beard to show his ambition. Madame Su, whose wife relied on her husband's noble orders, had to help her husband trim his beard almost every day, striving for perfection. Jean Lanting rose up from the small counties and counties within Bailiang's jurisdiction. First, he broke the rules and became the Great Yellow Door, and then he became the Son of Heaven's close minister. In the blink of an eye, with a shake of his body, he became the Imperial College's big shot that all scholars looked up to, obtaining the authority to control the rise and fall of all scholars under the heavens. Jean Lanting had to quietly wait every morning for the sky to turn white, his line of sight becoming clearer, before he rode a carriage to the Imperial College. Occasionally, he would lift the carriage's curtains and gaze at the reverent and burning faces on the road, making Jean Lanting feel as if a lifetime had passed. Back then, when he bent down to lift the carriage's curtain and stepped down from the carriage, Jean Lanting felt as if a lifetime had passed. Back then, when he met people, he would give them handmade proclamations, but almost no one was willing to accept them. Now, countless people wanted them, yet Jean Lanting didn't want to give them the slightest bit. However, Jean Lanting didn't become complacent. After living in the capital for more than 2 years, he had seen many farces of sudden wealth and sudden loss of power. For example, the Song family's 3 outstanding talents, 2 senior and junior teachers died of anger and 1 resigned from his position. The Song family's young phoenix, who used to need Jean Lanting's milk to curry favor with, completely faded out of the court's view. The more Jean Lanting knew about the treacherous situation in the imperial court, the more he cherished the few nobles he had when he was dormant and bowing his head. The former Left Chancellor Huan Wen, who was a pillar of the nation, was rarely willing to accept the proclamations he sent. Now, he had become the Grand Secretary of the Wenting court, replacing the leader of the remnant party, Sun Shiji, and was honorably promoted to the left servant Shi of the province. There was one more person Jean Lanting had never revealed on the surface. Even when he was beside Madame Su, the woman who shared the same bed as him, he didn't mention a word of this person. Jean Lanting clearly remembered that morning's court session, when he was rolling his eyes and ridiculing him along the way. It was only that senior who also came from the yellow door who patted him on the shoulder and said something extremely heartwarming. A gentleman would die for his bosom friend. As for the king of Bailiang's recommendation letter, Jean Lanting avoided talking about it. In private, he regarded it as his reverse scale. If anyone was tactless enough to mention this matter to him, regardless of whether you were the son of a minister or a descendant of a general, Jean Lanting would immediately leave in a huff of anger on the spot, breaking off all relations and never laughing with Shi Yan again. Moreover, Jean Lanting had never felt that lame Su had any merit in recommending him. The world's orthodoxy was in the house of Zhao. Even if you, whose surname is Su, were bestowed the title of king with a different surname, even if the throne was hereditary, how many generations of glory, splendor, wealth and rank could you last? Casually flipping through the history books, even if those aristocratic families had the iron scroll of death for those who are not guilty of treason, in their homes, weren't they still casually found by the emperor to be guilty of treason and implicated 9 generations of their families? Saying goodbye to the old year and moving to a new residence, a double blessing came at the same time. The Right Chancellor's residence was changed to a new one that was bestowed by the emperor. It used to be the residence of a Liang imperial family member. 200 years ago in Great and City, it was extremely glorious. Because it had lost its hereditary title and was given the title of general, living in this first-class residence was somewhat suspicious. However, since they were members of the imperial family who hadn't committed any major crimes, it wasn't easy to get them to move out. Fortunately, when they heard that Jean San Lang of the Imperial College was moving in, their face shone brightly. They also privately received a large sum of silver from the imperial palace, so they conveniently moved out. The current emperor was thrifty, so the dishes made in the imperial kitchen were just decorations. Later on, it was the empress who suggested that there be a meal list. Every day, the meal list would point out that a certain item was to be bestowed to a certain person. For example, the head of the internal court, the princes and princesses, the powerful officials in the court, and the generals in the capital were all expected to be bestowed. Today, a grand eunuch personally carried a rosewood meal box wrapped in yellow satin to keep warm and came to the new residence of Jean San Lang. Jean Lanting didn't leave anything behind and finally begged the grand eunuch to let him keep the pair of ebony chopsticks that wasn't considered a valuable item. A grand eunuch was secretly stuffed into the grand eunuch's sleeve. The skin was golden and dazzling, and the meat was as fine as fat. What was most rare was that there was a scene of a yellow jade coexisting at the top. Without needing to look at it closely, just by casually playing with it, one would know that it wasn't an ordinary item. The grand eunuch leaving a pair of chopsticks behind wasn't something that overstepped his boundaries. However, if the news of Jean San Lang gifting an item that he liked spread out, not only would it not attract the stain of corruption, but it would also greatly improve his reputation. How could the grand eunuch not smile from ear to ear? She felt more comfortable looking at this Right Chancellor who was nearing 30 and had the potential to enter the ranks of cabinet elders. Giving away a piece of ancestral jade pendant and leaving behind a pair of ebony chopsticks that were only worth a few taels of silver, Madame Su's heart hurt. In the past, in the county, she relied on the power of her paternal family and had to pull on the ears and scold people. Now, she did not dare to do so. After growing a beard, Enchanting looked slightly older. Madame Su carefully asked, San Lang, why not go visit the Grand Secretary at the end of the year? San Lang is close to Tantanon, and this left servant Shi Darren and the Grand Secretary came from the same sect. They have been close friends for most of their lives. If San Lang goes to visit, no one will say anything. Enchanting said impatiently, Women, what are you talking about? Madame Su smiled angrily. She gathered her courage and did not dare to talk back in the end. In the past, when father and mother saw this husband of a little sure family, they did not have good expressions. Now that the family had moved to Great Peace City, which was right under the Son of Heaven's feet, they could only bow and bend their knees. Madame Su also tried to curry favor on the bed, but San Lang's arrogance grew. Madame Su always felt that the way he looked at her was no different from how he looked at a servant or a servant girl. In this era where women were as cheap as grass, after a man became famous, it was not hard to treat women as women. What was hard was to treat women as people. Chapter 884. Madame Su suddenly remembered something. Her parents were worried when they talked about it, which made her feel very uneasy. She had just gotten her hands on the riches and honor, but she didn't want to lose it just like that. Madame Su gritted her teeth and sat next to Enchanting. Her delicate body leaned close to him, especially her chest, which intentionally or unintentionally rubbed against his arm. Then she said softly, San Lang, I heard that you're in the Imperial College. Enchanting quietly pushed her away and sneered, Why? Are you scared by my husband's words the people are the most important, and the country is the second most important? What do you know? We're not on the same page. Your parents are shallow, so tell them not to bother me in the future. Madame Su lowered her head and said timidly, I know. Madame Su got up and left, feeling sad. Enchanting didn't care at all. He stared at the pair of ebony chopsticks and the corner of his mouth curled up. A scholar was conferred the title of Marquis and presided over half of the country. There were thousands of beauties, but only one country. Enchanting, who was alone, grabbed the pair of chopsticks and made a gesture of putting food into his mouth. He laughed crazily. During this year's New Year's Eve dinner, Mr. Lu of Jing'an Palace, who didn't drink much, was heavily drunk by the young lord. If he didn't drink, the lord would be so shameless that he would roll on the ground. Mr. Lu couldn't stand his master's tantrum and had to drink too much. When he finally got away, he was full of the smell of alcohol. He squatted at the foot of the courtyard and vomited again and again. The only maid beside him, Xinghua, gently patted his back. Although Mr. Lu suffered a lot, he was obviously in a good mood. He said that he would take Xinghua, whose real name was Lu Lingbao, to see the former residence. In fact, Xinghua often went to the dilapidated house in her spare time. The house was already bought by the Jing'an Palace. Whenever Xinghua went there, she would carefully clean it until it was spotless. She was already familiar with the place. The blind Lu Su didn't enter the house. He just stood at the door and didn't know what he wanted to see. Then he took Xinghua to Yongzi Alley, where he used to make a living by gambling. He squatted on the ground and leaned against the wall quietly. It was as if there was a chess game in front of him. He used 2 fingers to play the game gently. Xinghua did not say anything, but her eyes were gentle. The young blind man did not stop placing his chess pieces. He laughed and said, When our green party was defeated, I also added a handful of firewood. If I don't do this, Jing'an Palace will become nothing more than a decorative vase. I'm a snobbish person, and I'm bound to the prince's mansion for glory and disgrace. How can I just stand by and watch His Royal Highness not be able to display its power? Xinghua knew that in private, King of Jing'an, Zhao Sun, liked to address him as young Master Lu or Mr. Lu. When they were happy or joking, they would even affectionately call him Little Six. And the latter had always disrespectfully referred to him as His Royal Highness instead of King of Jing'an. If the Lu family wants to leave, Xiangfan City can't stop them. But it's not difficult to trip them up. Although it's not beneficial to the big picture, since His Royal Highness is not happy and insists on making trouble for that Bailiang, as a chess gambler, I can only do my best to gamble and bury some hidden troubles for the Lu family. If the wise Grand Secretary Lu was still alive, these little tricks might not work. But now that he's gone, it's hard to say. Xinghua, tell me, a treacherous person like me is not even worthy of a scholar, let alone a distinguished scholar. Xinghua changed her position to shield young Master Lu from the cold wind blowing into the alley. She said softly, young master, you're a person who does big things. You don't care about trifles. Lu Xuan smiled and said, there's a saying that if you don't sweep a house, how can you sweep the world? And there's another saying that a person who does big things doesn't care about trifles. The ancient books and ancient sayings really make the later generations confused. But I'm a blind man, so I can only rely on you to sweep the house. Xinghua rolled her eyes. I'd be happy to. Lu Xuan reached out his hand, as if the wine had boosted his courage. He wanted to touch Lu Lingbao's smooth cheek. But when Lu Lingbao moved closer, he had already retracted his hand. He said softly, we're lucky to depend on each other. Try to live a few more years. Lu Su leaned his head back against the wall. You blind man. Xinghua suddenly lowered her voice and said, young Master Lu, if you want to go to Bailiang, Lu Lingbao will protect you even at the cost of her life. Lu Su was stunned. He shook his head and smiled. I have my own plans. It's good here. At the tide listening lake in Bailiang, Chen Shiliang was sitting in a pavilion by the lake. Su Beiji, the grandson of Su Huainan, the former king of the northern courtyard, and Su Weisheng, the second commandery princess, who was sitting in a wheelchair, were also there. These three people with different identities formed a tripartite balance of forces. Su Weisheng, who was in charge of half of the intelligence agents in Bailiang, said calmly, I have a message for you. The Empress of Beimang has only brought one person to the border of Bailiang. Su Beiji said, and soon revealed the secret. It must be Tuoba. Chen Shiliang frowned and asked, we can't kill him? Su Beiji smiled. Of course we can kill him. It's just that we can't kill him. Chen Shiliang said, indifferently. Su Weisheng turned to the south and said with a smile, let's plan a little more. After all, they're the ones doing the work. Although Su Beiji had already been appointed as a local official, he rarely had the opportunity to come to Qingliang Mountain, and there were often rumors of him toasting with scholars, unlike Chen Shiliang, who from beginning to end lived in the deep recesses of the prince's mansion, racking his brain. Su Beiji didn't feel restrained even when facing Su Weisheng. He even dared to make a few harmless jokes. For example, he said lazily, I heard that His Royal Highness has tried his best to abduct many important people to come to Bailiang to work as coolies. He's really capable. If I were to say, with His Highness's looks, it's not difficult to deceive some ladies. I didn't expect him to be so good at deceiving men. Chen Shiliang was expressionless. He turned to look at the tide-listening lake with its thousands of koi carps. Su Weisheng pointed at Su Beiji and Chen Shiliang and said bluntly with a smile, Su Beiji, it's fine if you scold yourself. You even brought Chen Shiliang along. What's the point of killing 1,000 enemies and losing 1,000 of your own men? Su Beiji laughed. Princess, you don't know. I'm born with a black heart and thick skin. That's why I'm less injured than young Master Chen. Chen Shiliang shook his head helplessly. It was impossible to be friends with this guy, but even if he was an opponent, he still couldn't bring himself to hate him. Su Weisheng muttered to himself, new year, new cool, new atmosphere. Chapter 885. The next chapter will be published very late in the morning, so don't wait for the update. The gates of northern Liangdao and Liangling prefectures were opened wide. Almost at the same time, the gates of the cities were loosened. Not only were scholars able to enter northern Liang in a single file, there were also people from all walks of life, crooks mixed in with honest folk, who all headed towards northern Liang. A troop of cavalrymen quietly entered Lingzhou from the Mitsang Mountain Road, which was adjacent to the Kuei Gate and the Sword Pavilion. There were only 5 or 6 people in the troop, and they were all men. The horse and courier routes were gradually shrinking, and were no longer as prosperous as they were during the spring and autumn period. However, the Mitsang Mountain Road between Shu and Liang still cost a lot of money every year, and it was perfectly repaired, even better than during the spring and autumn period. To the merchants of both places, this was nothing but a great fortune. However, in the eyes of some people, the difference between the Bailiang cavalry going south and the elite Shu army going north was only a thin line. The troops stopped on a mountain with a broad view and looked south. The old man in the lead pointed at the sword pavilion and smiled. Originally, according to Yi Shan's plan, thousands of light cavalrymen would be under the control of Wang family's father and son. Added with the 6,000 elite warriors hidden in Mount Qingsheng, if we really wanted to annex the Central Plains, or if the imperial court pushed us too hard, not to mention anything else, the western line of western Shu and southern Zhao would be under our control within 3 months. However, since Qin Jibao went to Shu alone, even though he hasn't been crowned as the king of Shu and is still the minister of war, as long as he goes to Shu for a few years in the future, this break, Bailiang will be like a man with a sore under his armpit. We can't catch it, but we can't not catch it either. It's so uncomfortable. Other than the hunchbacked old man, there was also Crown Prince Su Fengnian, Northern Liang's new cavalry commander Yuan Zuozong, and Han Laozhan and Su Yanbing, who were about to become Lingzhou's deputy general. They stopped side by side and looked towards western Shu. Su Shao rode his horse to the peak of the mountain road in the Mitsang Ridge. Ever since he had put on the red fox fur hat on the warship at the Spring God Lake, he had never taken it off again. Su Shao turned his horse around. Previously, when Lu Qiu introduced me, I also met the fascinating old general of southern Tang, great ancestor Gu. From him, an outsider, I learned that our Bailiang's territory is not big and there are so many things to pay attention to. According to great ancestor Gu, the roads of Bailiang can be divided into 3 regions and 14 terrains. According to great ancestor Gu's teachings, Bailiang occupies the upper reaches of the world and is connected with the aura of all places. It can control the fate of the world. In the past, I only heard from Ishan that after Bailiang was unified by the Great Qin, there were a total of 1,281 wars in history. However, Ishan doesn't believe in the supernatural. Moreover, I also know that Ishan doesn't approve of Bailiang invading the Central Plains with the momentum of a lion hunting a rabbit and causing the Central Plains to be filled with smoke. Therefore, in these years, he has not lived happily. Su Fengnian, who wore a Bailiang saber at his waist, smiled and said, Master always said that the talents of the world must be controlled by knowledge. Only then can one's heroic spirit be restrained and one can take advantage of the situation to achieve great things. This is a genuine effort. Not to mention your notoriety in the Spring and Autumn War, just the background of our Su family alone is enough to make it useless even if that old faker Huang Sanja comes up with some auspicious omens. The scholars and the people's hearts will not lean towards the Su family. Nowadays, scholars, especially those who have failed to achieve their goals, are flocking to Bailiang. This is also because Bailiang has raised the banner of guarding the northwest for the Central Plains, giving them a way out. Otherwise, who would be willing to become an official in Bailiang? Su Shao raised his hand and used the horsewhip to push up his leather hat. He chuckled and said, Who asked father to be born a few hundred years earlier? Ishan said that he was born a few hundred years later, allowing the scholars of the world to gain power and completely destroying the foundation of the great and powerful clans. They would no longer be as demanding as they are now regarding the legitimacy of the emperor's orders. That would be a great era where anyone could sit on the emperor's throne. As for the common people, who would care what your surname is? As long as you give them a peaceful life, they will recognize whoever you are. They don't care who sits on the dragon throne and who doesn't. But speaking of which, your father only has some prestige left in the military. Not to mention the Central Plains, even in Bailiang, if one day we are crushed into pieces by Beimang's iron horse cavalry, if there is someone in Beimang who can govern the country well, most of the common people will completely forget about the Su family's 20 years of guarding their homes and courtyards. Speaking of this, father feels that the victory in the Battle of the Western Fortress was a fluke. In the Central Plains, the remnant citizens of West Chu who want to restore their country are truly inexhaustible. They advance dauntlessly, wave after wave, as if they don't know how the word death is written. In the future, it will be very difficult to rally the people's hearts. Our Bailiang, not to mention West Shu, even compared to Western Shu, is still far behind. This is all father's fault. He made do with conquering the world immediately, but after he dismounted, he became careless. In the end, governing the world is the ability of scholars. They are the best at it. Father didn't think so in the past, but now I have no choice but to accept it. When father was young, he suffered too much from them. Every time I see their sanctimonious faces, I can't help but want to beat them up. So in the future, when we interact with scholars, it will depend on you. Don't learn from father. You must have a good temper. Chapter 886. Su Fengnian nodded with a smile. Yoshi Plateau, Yubei Plain, Liangxi Corridor, Qilian Mountain, Longdong Longxi, Helan Mountain, and so on. There are a total of 14 places. Since Great Ancestor Gu has carefully divided the Bailiang theater of operations, I will have a clear target when I arrange my trusted generals. Then I will slowly encircle the scholars who are in charge of political affairs. Each of them will perform their own duties. With the brave soldiers guarding the border, it will not be easy for Bailiang to fall into chaos. There must be a lot of Zhao's spies in the scholars' rush to the north this time. I want to see how good they are at making trouble. Bailiang has the limitations of Bailiang, but it also has the unique advantages of Bailiang. As long as there are 300,000 Iron Horse cavalry, it is enough to protect itself. Except for Liangxi Corridor, which is a rich land, the other places are not rich and there is a problem of grain storage. The water transport in Guangdong has always been suppressed by the imperial court, but there are good generals and strong soldiers. Since ancient times, there have been many talents in the east and west rivers. Even Zhang Jiulu and other big shots in the imperial court are envious. To put it bluntly, even if we are hungry, we can beat the so-called soldiers outside of Bailiang until they cry for their parents. Su Xiao joked, "Oh, why do I feel that you have a little ambition to be a commander? I remember that when you were young, you always wanted to be a hero who would help when you saw injustice on the road. You have no interest in leading troops to fight." Su Fengnian calmly said, "Only when you have really walked through Jianghu, you will know that there is a limit to one's strength. Then the idea of being a hero will fade. Imagine that when the whip is used, tens of thousands of Iron Horse cavalry will swarm out. Who can stop it? Wang Xianji? Or Chao Chongqing?" Yuan Zuozong laughed softly and said, "If it is them, they can still stop it." Su Xiao laughed heartily. He was very gratified that this adopted son of his could talk and laugh with the eldest son of his first wife. At that time, the 6 adopted sons were all high-spirited. Not to mention Lu Qiu, only the indifferent Yao Jian had some contact with his son, which made Su Xiao worry a lot. Among the adopted sons, Yuan Zuozong's temperament was not inferior to Chen Jibao's. White Bear could actually bow his head. Qi Dangguo was almost willing to surrender to Fengnian, which was undoubtedly an unexpected surprise. The two retinues, Han Laozhan and Su Yanbing, looked at each other and smiled. In fact, the two of them were from the same sect as the Spear Immortal, Wang Xiu. It was just that people only knew that Han Laozhan was Wang Xiu's junior brother and not Su Yanbing. As one of the 4 grandmasters of Jianghu, Wang Xiu was unparalleled in the northwest of the Central Plains. Not only was Han Laozhan overshadowed, but Su Yanbing, who had left the sect early to explore Jianghu, was also overshadowed. Even Su Fengnian returned to Bailiang with them this time. He learned from Han Laozhan that Su Yanbing was so outstanding that Wang Xiu, who was much older, almost had no hope of catching up with him. Wang Xiu's father had to banish and invite this disciple, who was not surnamed Wang, out of the Wang family. Su Fengnian figured out that the reason why Su Xiao dared to leave Bailiang openly and enter the hinterland of the Central Plains was not because of Han Laozhan, the Spear Immortal's junior brother, but because of the unknown Su Yanbing. When the king of Bailiang went to the capital for the last time, Su Xiao went to the imperial astronomer and met the Empress Zhao Ji. Ren Tu also brought Su Yanbing and not Han Laozhan. The group continued to travel north on the courier road. Su Xiao and Su Fengnian rode side by side. Su Xiao said softly, "Other than the protector general of Bailiang and the commander of the cavalry and infantry, the 3 positions have been settled. Lu Qiu, and your second brother Yuan have already taken them. Yan Wenluan's commander of the infantry also has to be given to great ancestor Gu. Next, the commander of Bailiang, Daoliang and Yuling have the most power. The commander of Liangzhou has always been held by the protector general of Bailiang. The commander of Yuzhou has already been given to the ambitious Huang Fucheng. Su Yanbing and Han Laozhan are the deputy commanders of Lingzhou. What are your plans? Su Fengnian hesitated and said, Yan Wenluan's side is not easy to deal with. After all, he is an old general with meritorious service. Yan Wenluan is not as old as Zhong Hongwu, and he is also smooth and slick. I plan to let great ancestor Gu take over Liangzhou's commander of Liangzhou from Lu Qiu, first. Wang Ji, the meritorious official who submitted his pledge of allegiance at Iron Gate Pass, and some of the capable generals of the Phoenix Battalion, will wait for these people to gain a foothold before we can make a move on Yan Wenluan. To be honest, if Yan Wenluan understands the big picture, even if I have to bear the infamy of burning the bridge after crossing the river and have to choose between great ancestor Gu and Yan Wenluan, I am still willing to let great ancestor Gu suffer and continue to let Yan Wenluan, this old general, stabilize the border. In any case, great ancestor Gu already has no way out. At worst, I will personally go and apologize and be beaten and scolded. Great ancestor Gu is a military maniac. I don't believe that he is willing to leave Bailiang and become a wine cellar and farmhouse elder. Su Shao frowned. People like great ancestor Gu are stubborn and hard to tame. Aren't you afraid that he will hold a grudge? People's hearts change. If great ancestor Gu intentionally does not contribute, it will be an immeasurable loss to Bailiang, which urgently needs a general to stabilize the situation. Su Fengnian smiled indifferently. Speaking of buying people's hearts, I am not as capable as you. I have never expected people to bow down to me and become friends at first sight and be loyal to me from then on. That is a fool's dream. Besides, a bowl of water that is fair is not fair in itself. Yan Wenluan is a flag of the Bailiang army. This flag can fall, but if the way it falls is dishonorable, just to let great ancestor Gu quickly become a new leader, the gains will not make up for the losses. If great ancestor Gu does not even wait for this little time, then he is only destined to be a general, not a commander. Su Shao pointed at Su Fengnian and smiled without saying anything. Su Fengnian was confused. Su Shao could not hide anything from his son, so he spoke frankly. The last time I drank and chatted with great ancestor Gu, the 2 of us did not sleep for the whole night. In the end, great ancestor Gu told me that after he arrived at Bailiang, he himself did not want to rise to the top in one step and cause unnecessary turmoil for the new master, Bailiang. But he must get one of the generals of the 3 provinces, at least the general of Lingzhou, and best the general of Liangzhou. As long as you agree to this, he will serve you with his life. Oh, great ancestor Gu is such a courageous and fearless person, but now he has learned to weigh the pros and cons, and coincides with you. You too, big and small foxes, have you been colluding since long ago? Su Fengnian laughed and said, Great ancestor Gu is so considerate, it would not be right if I did not give him an infantry commander position in the future. Su Shao sighed and said, Father is completely convinced of my old age. Su Fengnian said with a smile, I am just a little clever, not good enough to be on the stage. I am far inferior to you. Su Shao shook his head and narrowed his eyes as if he was drunk. He said, Don't comfort me. As a father, it is never a sad thing to admit that I am old because of my son. There is nothing happier than this in the world. Su Fengnian said helplessly, At noon, we drank and ate meat at the inn at the foot of the mountain, but I did not see you admit that you are old. You are already so old, and you still want to drink with me? How many times did you secretly go to the toilet? Twice or thrice? The old man looked embarrassed. The old man then said with a smile, When we go back to the border and meet that old woman who is protected by Tuoba, I will rely on you to keep up appearances. Su Fengnian said calmly, Okay. Chapter 887. Ever since the miserly Gongda became the administrator, his ability to make peace was top-notch. He tried to persuade everyone to make peace and not break up. Thus, Lingzhou became more and more harmonious. Other than the Zhong family, whose roots were in Longqing County, which was a little unhappy, the rest of the families were still doing well. Moreover, old General Zhong's eldest son, Zhong Qingxin, was still the governor of Longqing County. The new noble of northern Liang, Su Beiji, was just a small soldier who was promoted 3 ranks. His position was not that high, but he continued to work for Sir Zhong. It could be seen that the Zhong family and the Su family were not at the point of falling out. However, there was a piece of news that quickly spread in the Lingzhou officialdom. The 2 retainers of the great general, Han Laozhan and Su Yanbing, had both become Lingzhou's deputy generals. His Royal Highness, who had returned to Beiliang after causing a ruckus in the capital, actually became Lingzhou's general. This made people feel that it was a bit inconceivable. Many retired generals were silently cursing why the crown prince did not just sit on the chair of Beiliang's protector general. Why did he extend his hand into the Lingzhou officialdom? This was not very proper. Anyways, after the new year at the border of Yuzhou, there would be a martial arts examination that was held once every 3 years. Everyone knew that the great general had already started to make arrangements for his death. According to the whispers in the Lingzhou officialdom, rather than Crown Prince Su Fengnian not being liked in Lingzhou, it was better to let Chu Lushan and Yuan Zuozong's 2 foster sons help him to become the commander at the border. Whether it was showing off or hiding in the abyss, it was fine if everyone did not see it and did not feel annoyed. No matter what, it was better than taking over the hot potato that was Lingzhou's general. The mansion of the administrator was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. The doors were wide open to welcome the guest. Sir Li, who was already a rank 2 border official, was grinning from ear to ear. He treated the great general who suddenly came to the Li mansion like a bodhisattva. After obtaining the inside information that His Highness was going to become Lingzhou's general, Li Gongda talked until his mouth was dry. He finally got an old neighbor on the same street to vacate a beautiful mansion. He temporarily hung a plaque and turned it into the Lingzhou general's mansion. Lingzhou's capital had a beautiful Jinnu lake. There were only a few mansions that had the qualifications to draw water into the mansion. The old owner who occupied this place used to be an old general under Beiliang cavalry commander Zhong Hongwu. Later on, he got closer to Dian Xiongzong and the other young generals under Chen Jibao. Li Gongda took advantage of this weakness and used both kindness and power to make the old general leave with his many beautiful wives and concubines. At this moment, Su Fengnian, who had just become a standard 4th-rank general, was taking a leisurely stroll in the general's mansion. Previously, he had gone to the Li mansion to show his face before leaving. He really couldn't resist the administrator's attentiveness, so he left behind Su Shao and Yuan Zuozong, Han Laozhan, to accompany him. He brought along one of Lingzhou's deputy generals, Su Yanbing, to walk through the corridors and corridors. Of Wang Xiu's 2 junior brothers, Han Laozhan could be considered familiar with the art of war, but the martial arts maniac beside him, Su Yanbing, was just barely passable. Compared to Han Laozhan, who really wanted to take root in Lingzhou and consolidate at every step, Su Yanbing was just there to deal with unexpected situations. Moreover, Su Yanbing's personal ambitions did not lie here. Before he left the Li manor, Su Shao had a playful look in his eyes, saying that there was a little surprise waiting for him in the house. Su Fengnian did not have any expectations. He had seen many immortals of the Jianghu flying around. Since he had slacked off on the path of martial arts, needless to say, the secret manuals could be sold at a low price at the Tide Listening Pavilion. He also did not care about divine weapons and sharp weapons. As for women, his 2 future concubines had followed him to Beiliang, so Su Fengnian did not want to attract any emotional debt. However, when Su Fengnian suddenly saw the young girl dressed in Beimang's grassland woman's attire, he was somewhat stunned and pleasantly surprised. He never would have thought that it was the young girl who had great connections with the Beimang imperial family, Huyan Guanin. Back then, in order to save the tribe she was in, he had stopped the herd of wild bulls in the canyon. Only then did he engage in a deathmatch hunting with Tuoba Chunsun, who was favored by the heavens at the right time and place. At that time, Su Fengnian had almost lost his life to Tuoba Chunsun's lightning spear. Su Yanbing was very tactful. He went to another place to enjoy the scenery, leaving Su Fengnian alone with the girl. Su Fengnian pondered for a bit and understood. After he returned from Beimang, he told her everything in detail about his dangerous experience. During this time, he mentioned Huyen Guanin's Chang flute. He reckoned that it was Su Xiao who followed the vine to find the melon and brought her from Beimang to Lingzhou. Su Fengnian sat with her in the pavilion. He asked her in the prairie language, "Your brother Baoji didn't come to Beiliang?" The girl with the appearance of 95 was obviously not as melancholy and sentimental as the girls of the Central Plains. She shook her head and said with an open-minded smile, "My brother is a young eagle on the prairie. The prairie is his home. My brother also said that he must become the biggest chick on the prairie and have the most extensive and fertile pastures. In the future, he will bring our benefactor to gallop on a horse and snatch the most beautiful girl, the fiercest warhorse, and the best wine for our benefactor." Su Fengnian remembered the strong-headed child who liked to roll around in the sheepfold. He had the boldness to pick up a lamb and throw it around. He smiled and said, "He's much more ambitious than me." The young girl, whose style was between a young girl and a married woman, had a curious look on her face. She couldn't help but gently smile and ask, "Our benefactor always said that he was a scholar from Gusai Prefecture. How did he become the son of a prominent family in Beimang, the archenemy of Beiliang?" Su Fengnian leaned against a pillar and looked at the small lake in the mansion. He sighed and said, "It's probably the so-called unpredictable affairs of the world." Huyen Guanin said softly, "There was an old man who was more dignified than the biggest chick on the prairie. He ordered me to be our benefactor's maidservant in the future and serve our benefactor's basic necessities." Su Fengnian said softly, "You don't have to listen to him in the future. We Beiliang women always like to carry swords, ride horses, and draw bows. No one can restrain you. Even if you feel that this place is boring and want to go back to the prairie to see your brother, I can send someone to send you to the north." The delicate Chang flute tied to the waist of the dainty and beautiful woman was unexpectedly gloomy and speechless. The death soldier suddenly appeared outside the pavilion and said respectfully, "Your Highness, Su Beiji and Wu General Wang Ji from Dragon Eye County have come to visit." Chapter 888. For now, the Lingzhou general's mansion was nothing more than an empty shell. It was not an exaggeration to say that it had a golden exterior but a rotten interior, because this Lingzhou general's mansion was nothing more than an empty shell. Su Fengnian smiled, nodded and said, "From now on, they don't need to report when they come here." There were smart servants in the mansion who led the way for them. Su Fengnian walked out of the pavilion to greet them. Wang Ji's father, Wang Shizu, was not only a former subordinate of Beiliang, but also a general of Swords Gate. He was a secret chess piece that Li Yishan had placed in Kuei Gate for many years. This father and son pair eventually played a significant role in the Battle of Iron Gate. Wang Ji was indeed a valiant general who lived up to expectations. Even when facing Han Diaosi, he dared to fight to the death. In order to stop the man-cat, he lost 1,000 of his 3,000 elite cavalrymen. After joining Beiliang, only half of his 2,000 personal guards were left. Last time, his performance in Longqing County was also very eye-catching. Therefore, Su Fengnian had a very good impression of him. Su Beiji was quick to adapt to the local customs. He was dressed like a scholar, even more so than the famous scholars of Jiangnan. He was elegant and graceful. Wang Ji was escorting him from the side. One was a scholar and the other was a warrior. Huyen Guanin stood alone and timidly in the pavilion. She seemed to be out of place. Most women were like that. They were just the icing on the cake. Su Fengnian put his arm around Su Beiji's shoulder, smiled to Wang Ji and said, "This time, General Wang, you didn't become the Deputy General of Lingzhou. Do you feel angry? If you do, just say it. But I still can't give you the Deputy General position." Wang Ji didn't talk about stage fright. Instead, he grinned and said, "Your Highness, we are all rough men. We know that we shouldn't take things that we didn't do. We don't have any achievements now, so we don't feel angry. If we do something great in the future, not to mention the Deputy General position, we can even fight for the position of Lingzhou General. We won't hesitate." Su Fengnian smiled and nodded. He pointed at Su Yanbing, who had quietly returned to the pavilion. He introduced the new Deputy General of Lingzhou, Su Yanbing. Wang Ji, you should interact with him more in the future. General Su is one of the top martial arts masters in Beiliang. He is much more useful than hanging around me, who has no real power. Wang Ji's eyes suddenly brightened. The words, one of the top, had more weight than the Deputy General of Lingzhou. Yuan Zuozong was the third master in the Liang army after Gu Jiantang and Chen Jibao. If Su Yanbing was one of the top martial artists, he would most likely be a fierce general on the same level as the unparalleled cavalry warrior Yuan Baixiong. Wang Ji didn't dare to underestimate him. He immediately cupped his fist to the deputy general. Su Yanbing only nodded slightly in return. Su Fengnian looked at Su Beiji and asked with a smile, Zhu Zi, are you getting along well with young Master Zhong? I heard that those beautiful concubines of his admire your talent and took turns to recommend themselves to you. They even almost fought with Lingzhou's courtesan Belle for your affections. Now, Beiliang is spreading the news that there is a Beimang aristocrat called Su Beiji. He is even more carefree than an immortal. Su Beiji smiled faintly, more than enough, but far from enough. With His Highness in front of me, this little romance is nothing. Wang Ji was speechless. It was rumored that Su Beiji, who didn't have any strength of character as an official, had a close relationship with His Royal Highness. It seemed that the rumors were true. If it were someone else, they would have been drenched in sweat. Wang Ji didn't dare to treat the Crown Prince of Beiliang, who dared to kill the Western Region Prince with a bottle, as a hedonistic son. Normally, when faced with Zhong Hongwu and the other elders who had fought alongside their fathers in the military, they would try their best to curry favor with them. Su Fengnian and Su Beiji sat in the pavilion. Wang Ji naturally followed Su Yanbing to guard outside the pavilion. Su Fengnian glanced at Wang Ji's burly back and retracted his gaze. He smiled and said, this time, there are hundreds of people from the Lu family and Shangyin Academy in Qingzhou. They are all crying piteously for food. Lingzhou's officialdom is bloated and has the most fat meat. The administrator is the peacemaker in Beiliang. He claims to be second, but no one claims to be first. He definitely can't be the bad guy. Chen Shiliang is also busy with the salt and iron industry. Why don't you take over? We can use this opportunity to streamline the positions of the generals and get rid of a large number of idle generals. We can also learn from Beiliang so that we can live up to our name in the future. Su Beiji didn't make a sound. He was quite arrogant. Wang Ji, who was listening attentively, was a bit worried. Beiliang was like living with a tiger. Otherwise, the great general wouldn't have been privately called the second emperor by the imperial court. His Royal Highness was actually no different from the crown prince of a country. Although Wang Ji was careless in front of Su Fengnian, he was also meticulous and meticulous. Those seemingly crude and simple-minded generals in the historical novels were all meticulous people in the official history books. If one wanted to stay by the side of the monarch and not cut off their good fortune, they would have to be very knowledgeable. It was almost like a bottomless pit. Earlier, Wang Ji and Su Beiji had been drinking. At the time, His Royal Highness didn't kneel to the emperor in Tai and City. Su Beiji was drunk to his heart's content and drank happily. He revealed the tip of the iceberg of his knowledge. When they talked about the matter of planning for the future, just the classification of the officials, Su Beiji gave 19 types: solitary official, governing official, capable official, toad official, cat official, and corpse official. It was much more complicated than the 9 ranks of martial artists. When Wang Ji heard this, he was both dumbfounded and benefited greatly. He thought that this young Master Su had really cultivated to immortality in the government. Even Wang Ji, who had extremely high horizons, was full of admiration. Su Fengnian continued to ask, Beiliang officials have the custom of awarding mink hats at the end of the year. Then from the end of winter to the beginning of spring, how about you, Su Beiji, give out a few hundred new mink hats of all sizes in Lingzhou? Su Beiji asked back, you, the general of Lingzhou, don't care, but can the administrator not care? Su Fengnian nodded and said, otherwise, why would I be a general? Isn't it because I'm determined to help you block the fierce criticism? I promise you, no matter what words or people, everything will stop when it comes to me. You don't have to look or listen. Su Beiji said calmly, Lingzhou's provincial governor is currently still held by the administrator. Can your highness give me this hat first? Wang Ji clicked his tongue in wonder. Su Beiji was really bold. He wanted the hat of a fourth-rank official as soon as he opened his mouth, and he wanted it so righteously. If this got out, wouldn't the Liang officials who had been stuck at this threshold their entire lives be angered half to death? Huyen Guanyin, who had learned some of the language of Liang in this mansion, heard every word and roughly understood the meaning of this conversation. Her mouth fell open slightly as she looked at the gray-haired man. Her eyes were a little dazed. Su Fengnian stood up and smiled. I'll give it to you now. Chapter 889. The next chapter will be in the wee hours of the morning, so it will still be rather late. Su Fengnian went alone to the mansion of the administrator in Bailiang, whose standard was only lower than that of Mount Qingliang. Now that he was familiar with the Li mansion, he didn't even need the steward to lead him to the back garden where Su Xiao and Li Gongda rested. In the courtyard, there was a shady locust tree. The officialdom in Bailiang knew that Li Gongda was fond of planting locust trees in recent years, so many locust trees from other provinces had been moved into the mansion. Planting locust trees in front of the mansion was a sign of good fortune. Li Gongda's talent and learning were not obvious. Nowadays, most of the imperial examinations were in the autumn locust tree season, and the month was also known as the locust tree yellow. It could be seen that official Li was still brooding over the fact that he had failed the imperial examinations many times in the past. Su Fengnian walked along a secluded path lined with hollyhock trees. He saw a long sandalwood couch placed under a tree. Su Xiao was drinking green ant wine alone. Li Gongda used to kneel more than sit in front of the king of Bailiang. Now that he was the administrator, he stood to the side, holding a wine jug and helping to pour wine. In other vassal states, the administrator was a first-class official with the same rank as the minister of the 6 ministries. There was no one like Li Gongda who bowed and bent his knees. Not to mention the administrator of West Chu, Sun Shiji, even the prince of Guangling, Zhao Yi, had personally visited him several times, but he had been refused the door. Just like Dai Yuzhen, the administrator of the 2 Huai Dao. She had openly bullied the prince of Huainan Zhao Yi until he couldn't breathe. From this, one could see the weight of the administrator's authority. As soon as Su Xiao saw Su Fengnian, he immediately wanted to give up the sandalwood couch. However, Su Fengnian ignored him and asked Yuan Zuozong to ask for 2 chairs from the steward of the mansion. He sat down with Li Gongda. The afternoon sun shone on his body, making him feel warm. After drinking a few cups of green ant wine, he knew that His Royal Highness had come back. However, he found that this young man who always called him uncle was not in a hurry to expose him. Therefore, Li Gongda had to sit with him and drink with him. He talked about some interesting anecdotes of Lingzhou, jesting and flattering him. He talked about how His Royal Highness had won the hearts of the people in the capital city. Whether Su Xiao believed it or not was another matter. However, it was comfortable to listen to it and he showed a genial smile. Su Fengnian smiled and looked at it with mixed feelings. At that time, Yan Qiji and Yan Dongwu's father, Yan Jieshi, was the provincial governor of Lingzhou. His official position was about the same as Li Gongda, the provincial governor of Fengzhou who had not been incorporated into Yuzhou at that time. Now, Yan Jieshi had betrayed Bailiang and went to Taiyan City to be a relative of the royal family. Perhaps, he would become the father-in-law of the emperor in the future. Li Gongda was not bad either. He did not become an official in the capital city but became an extreme local official. Actually, Su Fengnian was closer to Uncle Yan at that time. Uncle Li had a bad reputation. However, although both the Yan and Li families had passed the Dragon Gate, the women of the 2 families still hated this dissolute son. The female scholar, Yan Dongwu, had become the crown princess. Li Fuzhen, on the other hand, was obsessed and became a scholar from a poor family. Who said that the pavilion closest to the water would enjoy the moonlight first? Su Fengnian had been friends with Li Hanlin and Yan Qi for so many years, but he did not get any good treatment from their sister. It was not that Su Fengnian had any improper thoughts towards them. It was just that back then, he was frivolous and liked to tease the young ladies of noble families. Yen Dongwu would even argue with him. Su Fengnian was even more ruthless. His harsh words and cold words were lacking, and his eyes were cold all year round. Su Fengnian lazily leaned against the back of the chair and could not help but laugh. Uncle Li was rather open-minded towards the poor scholar who did not match his family background. Not only did he not break them apart, he even secretly paved the way and raised his status. From a poor family to an aristocratic family, and then from a minor official to a high-class official, the two matters of status and class were all settled magnanimously. He just did not know if Uncle Li would take the opportunity to make a move again this time when the Lingzhou officialdom was turned upside down. Su Fengnian did not have the intention to make things difficult for the poor scholar. Although he had seen the scholar's face and shrewdness outside Toma Temple, and that fellow had been schemed against by Su Beiji and felt that Su Fengnian had entrusted Li Hanlin to the wrong person, but since Li Hanlin's sister was enjoying it, Su Fengnian could not be bothered to point fingers. If that poor scholar really had the ability to become an official, Su Fengnian would not mind giving him a slightly bigger mink hat. To the Bailiang, whether or not he was an honest official was not important, whether or not he was a capable official was the key. Furthermore, that scholar might become the second Bailiang. Who dared to say that Li Fuzhen must have made a mistake? If a woman was foolish, perhaps she would have foolish fortune. When Su Fengnian saw that he had drunk to his heart's content, he looked at Li Gongda in a half-drunk state and said with a smile, "Uncle Li, do you know that there is a young man called Su Beiji in Longqing County?" Although Su Beiji's official position is not high, only as secretary, subordinate to Longqing Junju, Uncle Li knows that even Longqing County's Governor Zhong Qingxin is extremely respectful towards Su Beiji. Because this person is extremely knowledgeable, what is even more difficult is that he can learn and use it for himself. He is familiar with governance and is not a self-proclaimed lofty bookworm. Many times, Zhong Qingxin did not hesitate to part with his love and did his best to recommend this person to Uncle Li. If your highness did not mention it, Uncle Li would have already decided that after the beginning of spring next year, Su Beiji would be promoted to the position of Lingzhou's Minister of Education, to serve as a province's Minister of Education, so that he can make the best use of his talent. The corners of Su Fengnian's mouth curled up, and he nodded. He turned to look at the old man who had been smiling and did not interrupt. "Su Shao, which official position is higher between the Counselor of Learning and Classics?" Su Shao insisted on being a hands-off boss. He raised his cup and pointed at Li Gongda. "Don't ask the blind. Father is also a layman." "You have to ask your Uncle Li," Li Gongda quickly said with a smile, "their ranks are similar. However, the Classics is in charge of a prefectural's governance, so the salary is slightly higher than the Counselor of Learning." Li Gongda slapped his forehead, and the sound was very crisp. This slap was definitely not light, and he had a look of realization. Look at Uncle Li's memory. Lingzhou's Classics, Yang Qinli, is not young anymore. Not long ago, he was complaining to Uncle Li that his physical strength was not good, and he had the idea of retiring and returning to his hometown. Coincidentally, Uncle Li feels that Su Beiji should not be a Counselor of Learning. Being a Classics is very good. Lingzhou's governance can only be managed by Su Beiji so that Uncle Li can be at ease. Su Fengnian poured a full cup of wine for Li Gongda and himself. After drinking it in one gulp, he said with hazy drunk eyes, "Uncle Li, you don't know. When Su Beiji was tricked by me to come to Bailiang, I promised him that he would become a high-ranking official. However, as for how high is considered a high-ranking official, I don't know anything about it." "What Counselor of Learning?" "I estimate that he would only be around 6th or 7th rank." "Isn't that the same as being a county magistrate in a lower prefecture?" Even if Su Beiji does not mind being a low-ranking official, since nephew had boasted, I am afraid that I will break my promise. Furthermore, I shamelessly begged Su Shao to be Lingzhou's general to show off. If Su Beiji becomes a Classics administrator, we will see each other all the time, and I will be embarrassed to drink wine with him. Uncle Li, don't you think so? Chapter 890. Liang officials, according to the law, below grade 3, were not only split into main and secondary grades, but also into upper and lower grades. For example, although they were both grade 4, there were actually 4 grades. Capital officials and local officials, main officials, secondary officials, and lower officials. There were many mysteries hidden within. To become an official, entering the lower grade was the first dragon gate. Regardless of whether one was a lower grade 9 official or not, the difference between the grades was like a chasm. The next grade 4 was the second dragon gate that was even harder to cross. Currently, most of the so-called nobles and ministers were above grade 4. To climb to this position, one had to rely on one's family background, luck, and ability. For example, the Song family's old and young masters, the father and son, had dominated the literary world for over 20 years. Among them, the young master was only a lower grade 3 Imperial College's right chancellor. Thus, even though Li Gongda was gentle and humble in front of Su Xiao, a sneeze from him in Lingzhou was enough to make those county governors tremble in fear. At this moment, Li Gongda still did not have the aura of a main grade 2 official. He nodded his head like a chicken pecking rice. Yes, that makes sense. Your Highness is a man of your words, so how can you go back on your words? If you want to blame someone, blame Uncle Li for not thinking it through. Currently, there are still Lingzhou Huangnam County's county governor and Fengyu County's county governor, both of which are suitable for Su Beiji. Fengyu County is the biggest county in Beiliang. It has a special rank and is comparable to a county governor. It is also not far from our Lingzhou city. Su Fengnian suddenly yawned and put down his wine cup. He stood up and said with a lazy expression, Huangnam County's county governor Song Yan is in his prime and has a good reputation. As for the county governor, although Fengyu County is the biggest county in Beiliang, it doesn't sound good. Forget it, it will be the new year in a few days, so Uncle Li doesn't need to worry about this. I'm just a general in Lingzhou. If I keep talking about Lingzhou's government affairs, I'm afraid that the next time I visit, Uncle Li won't let me eat and drink. Li Gongda slapped his thigh heavily. Su Xiao and Su Fengnian both stood up. He did not dare to sit there arrogantly, so he quickly stood up and said softly, Your Highness, since Su Beiji was Longqing County Governor Chao, why don't you let him be the Lingzhou County Governor? Su Fengnian smiled. Let's talk about it later. As an important advisor to the head of a province, when the provincial governor was patrolling the territory, he could bring his own horse and carriage to accompany him. That was why he was called Biwei, and it could be said that he lived up to his name. As long as the county governor did not make a big mistake, half of the officials would be able to successfully become the county governor. Liang had 30 provinces under the Taoism. As the county governor's candidate, county governor was also an important official with a lot of power. No one would look down on them. Su Beiji jumped from a county governor to a county governor, which was equivalent to easily crossing the second dragon gate in the officialdom. Even the entire Beiliang Taoism would have to raise their eyebrows. But what made Li Gongda uneasy was that His Royal Highness was still in low spirits. He looked absent-minded and easy to talk to, but this made Li Gongda, who had always been in control of the situation, feel uncertain. Su Xiao did not let Li Gongda see him off. The governor knew the essence of flattery, so he did not disturb the peace of father and son leaving the manor together. After Su Xiao went around the screen wall, he smiled. Is it your appetite or Su Beiji's appetite that is big? Is he eyeing the position of county governor that Li Gongda is unwilling to let go? Normally, Li Gongda would not be so reluctant, but now that there were less than 1,000 scholars pouring into Beiliang, most of them would stay in Lingzhou. There were many things that the governor could not say, but there were many things that were more convenient for the county governor to do. This is called a county official is not as good as the one in charge. Even if Li Gongda had not realized what was going on, with his eyesight, he would be able to quickly guess what you want. Father, let me say something more. Snakes have their ways, rats have their ways. In terms of military affairs in Beiliang, even if you make a fuss about a Huaihua general who has taken off his armor and returned to the fields, it is not a big deal. You can also be a Lingzhou general, but the circle of civil officials is big and small. They are all interconnected and even more intertwined. Just relying on fists cannot solve all the troublesome matters. This is also the root of why father has never liked to pay attention to local politics. Officialdom is Jianghu. Everyone has no choice. Officialdom is also not Jianghu. You can't just use force to convince people. Su Fengnian laughed softly. I know the severity of the matter. Actually, the governor of Huangnam County, Song Yan, is Li Gongda's favorite student. This official position is very sincere. If Su Beiji goes to Huangnan, even if Li Gongda's student does not support him, they will not cause trouble. However, Lingzhou is a joke. I know better than anyone that the governor is waiting for Hanlon to return home in glory. This position is simply tailor-made for my son. It is reasonable for him to become the county governor of Lingzhou in the future. If it were anyone else, even if it is Su Beiji who I think highly of, they are destined to not be successful. However, to be honest, whether Hanlon goes from joining the army to Lingzhou's deputy general and then to a general, or whether he goes down the path of a county magistrate instead of a county governor, I am happy to see it happen. No matter how unreasonable I am, how can I not have some selfishness towards Hanlon? Uncle Li, you are still a little petty. Su Shao walked forward with a hunched back and smiled. The size of the situation is not fixed. After being promoted, one's field of vision will be broadened, which may be of help. However, it is still not as good as some people's natural situation. Li Gongda became the governor not because he is very capable, but because he is suitable for this position. Speaking of which, if Li Gongda was not petty, he would not be able to reach this step today. Speaking of this, father had to talk about his experience again. Many people might not be doing well at the moment, but you still have to be more patient. Not to mention others, just like father, he didn't have this kind of breadth of mind from the start. Before he joined the army, he was still fighting with the street thugs every day. After he became a lieutenant, he never thought that one day he would be on the same level as those high and mighty court elders. When he begged them for soldiers, horses, money, and provisions, he still didn't have much face left. The only thing he didn't do was kneel down. The hardships I faced, even when I left Liaodong with those old brothers, father has never said anything about it. Su Fengnian nodded. Su Shao laughed without warning and said happily, just now, I saw you and Li Gongda arguing over there, drinking and scheming against each other. Just thinking about it makes me happy. Su Fengnian rolled his eyes and sighed. He said self-mockingly, in the end, I still did not get the position of Lingzhou provincial governor. I was still worried about how to meet Su Beiji. Just now, I made a solemn vow and said bold words to this fellow. In the end, in the middle of winter, I turned around and poured a basin of cold water on my head. Su Shao laughed even more happily. Why don't father go to Su Beiji's place to support you? Su Fengnian shook his head. Forget it. You go back to Liangzhou first. I will definitely rush back to eat New Year's Eve dinner. After the New Year and before the military exam at the border, I will obediently be the Lingzhou general who scares people. When Lingzhou is over, I will return to Qingliang Mountain. It should not take long. Su Shao nodded and walked out of the Li residence. Su Shao said with a playful smile, because of you, Li Fuzhen, that girl, is hiding behind the projector wall. She doesn't even greet me when she sees me. Won't you turn around to take a look? Su Fengnian did not turn around. He sent Su Shao to the carriage outside the residence and glared at him. Yuan Zuozong was riding a horse to protect him. Su Fengnian looked up and said, Second brother Yuan, don't let Su Shao drink too much. If he really wants to, let him drink 1 cup at most. It was rare for Yuan Zuozong to have the leisure to joke with a straight face. Wakinmei smiled and looked at the carriage. Father, who should I listen to? The old man in the carriage laughed. You will listen to him in the future. Chapter 891. As soon as Su Shao left, the surplus generals and captains of Lingzhou gradually gathered outside a mansion and handed over their letters to the general's gatekeeper. Most of the letters were made of expensive materials and were written in gold. One could not expect these rough men from the general's family to have any lofty and ancient style. On this street, the governor's mansion had the highest threshold. Logically speaking, it should have the most visitors, but the Lingzhou general's new mansion was full of people, which made people gasp in amazement. Inside the mansion, Su Fengnian was chatting with Su Beiji. Unexpectedly, when Su Beiji heard that he could not get an official position on Li Gongda's side, not only did he not find it strange, he even said that this was reasonable. Su Fengnian could not tell whether this fellow was praising him for being slippery or mocking him for being a fox relying on the tiger's might to get things done. However, since Su Beiji was not in a rush to become an official of the provincial governor, Su Fengnian took advantage of the situation and waited for the news happily. The housekeeper of the mansion, Zheng Fulu, was an old member of the prince's mansion that had been transferred from Mount Qingliang to Lingzhou. He was middle-aged and had a dignified appearance. In the past, His Royal Highness had spent a lot of money to buy poetry and literature. The silver had all been handled by Zheng Fulu, so he was very reliable in his work. At this moment, he jogged to the door of the study with a face full of joy and reported to the heir about the bustle outside the mansion. He held a large bag of name cards and scraped off the gold powder on them. It was probably enough for him to go to Lingzhou's Tiger Hill restaurant to eat and drink. Su Fengnian waved his hand at Zheng Fulu and said, "Reject all of them. Just say that I won't see a single one of them." Zheng Fulu bowed and made a sound of acknowledgement. He did not have any doubts and went back the way he came. He said that the Lingzhou general would not be seeing any guests today and then directly closed the gate of the mansion. He did not even let the side gate go. It was clear that there was no room for negotiation, and this made everyone give up completely. These martial artists who were tyrannical in Lingzhou were not very dejected when the gate was closed. They had originally called their friends and came in groups to join in on the fun. Who would really hope that the Lingzhou general who had only been there for a few days would give them a promotion? In the end, it was the identity of Bailiang's heir that made them have no choice but to lower themselves and drink the northwest wind this time. Furthermore, there was an unwritten rule in Bailiang's officialdom. Yuzhou was mostly Yan Wenluan's, while most of Lingzhou was Zhong Hongwu's private backyard. The two sides had never interfered with each other. This group of people were mostly the old subordinates of General Huaihua. Some of the direct subordinates who were deeply indebted to General Zhong were not even willing to show their faces. For example, a few captains with real power under the deputy general all gathered around the stove to boil wine. They secretly cursed that this heir was too vicious. He had just destroyed General Zhong's face, and he actually did not want to stop while he was ahead. He swaggered into Lingzhou and stepped on the old general's face that had already fallen to the ground. There were no young people who were as unparticular as him. They were all filled with righteous indignation, fighting for the old general's justice. One or two captains with bad tempers immediately slammed the table and stood up. A few of the more shrewd ones also had a dark expression as they drank wine. If they were asked to rebel against the Su family, they would not dare to, even if they had 100 guts. However, after being immersed in the officialdom for the past few years, they had learned a lot of tricks. They slacked off when they encountered something and were able to do it easily. Furthermore, not only were they a group of martial artists, everyone present was also related to the civil officials of Lingzhou's officialdom by marriage. These old foxes who sat behind the official's desk were well aware of the rules and regulations. They did not even need to say anything angrily for the Lingzhou officialdom to operate properly. Most importantly, no one could find fault with it. Didn't you scholars from other places come to Lingzhou to steal rice bowls? The hatred of stealing someone's official hat was far greater than the hatred of stealing someone's love. After these military officers discussed and weighed the pros and cons, they all left with sinister smiles on their faces. Bailiang had a small number of scholars, so most of them were officials from humble backgrounds. This group of people actually did not lack intelligence, naturally keen on currying favor. If the high officials could be said to be the awe-inspiring king of hell on the stage, then this group of people were the even more difficult to deal with little ghosts guarding the door. If some of these officials had brilliant methods, they could even make the officials into mere figureheads, controlling the officialdom, making their superiors become mere decorations. When Zhang Julu governed the imperial court, one of his policies was to target the shortcomings of the officials, directly viewing them as a disaster that harmed the country's throne. However, Grand Secretary Zhang was publicly acknowledged to be good at governing the country, but when it came to dealing with the officials, there was no improvement. There were also many important officials in the imperial court who criticized and ridiculed him. In particular, some of the pillars of the imperial court who came from humble backgrounds even chose to watch from the sidelines. If the imperial court, where scholars made up the majority, was still in such a state, Bailiang naturally would not be able to escape this fate. As a result, Lingzhou, which was right at the end of the year, was quickly thrown into chaos. Documents gradually piled up, gangs fought in the streets, criminals killed each other in prison, the granaries of the government either caught fire for no reason or became moldy by a few inches. All kinds of trivial matters sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain. Forget about those county officials who were badly battered, afraid that they would not be able to have a peaceful year. Even the administrator Li Gongda began to feel tired dealing with it. Every day, there were lower-level officials who came to complain. On the contrary, Huangnam County seemed like a crane in a flock of chickens, its political affairs large and small orderly. Longqing County was the complete opposite, its situation especially miserable, leaking air from all directions. It was rumored that Governor Zhong Qingxin personally took care of everything, busying himself to the point where he lit a lantern every night, so worried that he already had a few strands of white hair. Lingzhou's officialdom was a mess. The front of the Lingzhou general's manor was deserted, matching the cold winter season. A carriage silently drove out of Lingzhou's capital and headed toward Huangnam County. The coachman wore a short jacket made of yellow wolf skin. The more burly he was, the more shabby he seemed. No one would believe that he was the deputy general of Lingzhou. In the carriage, other than Su Fengmian, there was also the servant girl Huyan Guanyin. These days, Su Fengmian had been reading through the records of Lingzhou's officials in detail. There were many red circles and he did not pay much attention to this young girl who would have made it onto the rankings if she had come to Bailiang earlier. For this trip, when Su Fengmian crossed the threshold, he decided to have Jingfulu call her over to follow him out of the city. He did not know if it was because she was not acclimatized to the environment, but Huyan Guanyin was not as lively as she was when she was in a difficult situation on the grasslands. Her spirit was dim, and she was not as spirited as before. Su Fengmian thought that after returning to Lingzhou, if he had the chance, he would send her to a safe and quiet place. It was better than being sick and slowly destroyed in a noble residence. Some women were either held tightly in the palm of one's hand or truly treasured. Instead, it was a waste of natural resources. Originally, if Huyan Guanyin could adapt to Bailiang, Su Fengmian would not mind keeping her by his side. It did not matter if he ate her or not. Looking at her was pleasing to the eye and was good for the eyes. Su Fengmian was not idle during this trip. He had a document on the background of a few important officials in Huangnam County. These densely packed and delicate small regular script were the painstaking efforts of the second-class servant girls in Wutangan after working through the night. Su Fengmian, who had been with them for many years, could tell at a glance which was written by the green ants and which was written by the cucumbers. Su Fengmian rubbed the space between his eyebrows and put down the stack of letters. After going through it in his mind, he lifted the curtain. The unique cold air of the cold land hit him in the face. Su Fengmian did not put down the curtain for a long time. After leaving the city, Huyan Guanyin was a little sleepy. She curled up in the corner of the carriage, unable to endure the drowsiness. She was slightly dozing off. When the wind blew, she suddenly woke up. She quietly looked at the side of his face and bit her thin lips. Her lips were bright red and glistening, making people mistakenly think that if she bit a little harder, a few drops of blood would come out. Su Fengmian saw that she was not used to the cold and quickly put down the curtain. He smiled warmly and said, "I couldn't sleep last night, so I wandered around aimlessly. I saw a pot of impatiens by the window of your room. It's clearly past the flowering period, so how could it still bloom in such a cold weather?" Chapter 892. Huyan Guanyin blinked and said softly, "When I first entered the manor, I saw a few flowers in the corners of the manor. They didn't look like they were grown in the manor, so I gathered my courage and planted one in a small pot. I didn't know it was called a balsamine flower, nor did I know it was in bloom." Su Fengmian nodded and smiled. "It's the same as the shusher that's causing trouble for me in Bailiang. It's not a first-class product. But don't look at it just because it looks delicate, it can grow anywhere. A poor place like Bailiang is no exception." Some women who can't afford to buy rouge and face powder like to use its flower juice to paint their nails in summer and autumn. It's very eye-catching. Although this kind of thing has been criticized as a cheap product by famous scholars in Jiangnan who worship chrysanthemums and peonies, and has been given the harsh nickname of a chrysanthemum maid, I feel that regardless of whether or not she's a chrysanthemum maid, she can be used for people to admire and paint their nails. That's already the best use of her. There are a lot of them in my house. They grow all over the ground. Other famous flowers can't even be stocked by trees. However, I've never seen them bloom in winter. Presumably, it's because no one was willing to plant them in a pot and bring them back to the house that you accidentally delayed the flowering. That's right, this balsamine flower is very sturdy. My second sister gave it a nickname, hot-tempered. Under the scorching sun, when the wind blows, or when you pinch it with your fingernails, the seeds will bounce far away. When I was young, every time I made my second sister angry, she would give me a black face and not say a word for days. I always liked to use my hot-tempered nature to flick her face. I'd rather have her scold me than ignore me. In the end, Su Fengnian saw Huyen Guanyin staring straight at him. Su Fengnian said awkwardly, "You didn't do anything wrong. How could I bear to scold you? Besides, I have a lot of things on hand right now and am very frustrated. It's not that I don't want to pay attention to you. I do know how to write the 4 characters anger and introspection, and my handwriting is not much worse than that of a famous calligrapher. It's a pity that I haven't been good at it, and I often take my anger out on others. You haven't seen the scene of me getting angry with my father. When I was young and ignorant, as long as something didn't go my way, I would vent my anger on him. I could even take a broom and chase him for thousands of miles. But now that I think about it, even though I was childish, I didn't feel too guilty. Who asked him to be my father, the person closest to me? Right? Besides, at that time, his legs were very nimble and he ran very fast. Everyone else respectfully called him the king of Bailiang and the great general, but I called him the runaway general. Huyen Guanyin looked at him and grinned. That smile was as innocent as a child's. Huyen Guanyin lowered her eyes, not meeting his gaze. Su Fengnian saw her cowering timidly and mocked himself. Did he look like a criminal with the word pervert engraved on his forehead? He remembered that her entire tribe on the grasslands treated him like an immortal. How could he reveal his true colors so quickly? Su Fengnian collected his thoughts and lowered his head to continue picking up the letter on his knees. He quickly focused and gave Administrator Li a few days of time. It was probably because of the sudden wind and rain in Lingzhou's officialdom that Uncle Li was busy with government affairs and temporarily had no time to care about Su Beiji's promotion. Even though it was not to his liking, Su Fengnian was still willing to endure it. Back then, the Yan family had chosen a small path to escape Lingzhou. If he had not hinted to Su Shao, Yan Jieshi might not have been able to leave Bailiang so smoothly. Su Fengnian warned himself not to be so soft-hearted in the future. Huangnam County was where Li Gongda had made his fortune. Even though Li Gongda's reputation as an official was not good, his ability to judge people was not small. It was natural for him to appoint people by favoritism. However, a few of his disciples were considered capable officials in Bailiang's officialdom. If it were not for these people helping Li Gongda gain face, Su Shao would not have been so generous as to let Li Gongda become the administrator under one person just based on the relationship between the Li and Su families. The governor of Huangnam County, Song Yan, was one of the best. He did not have a prominent teacher and was self-taught. He was skilled in both magic and power. If it were not for the fact that he had many objections towards Su Shao and could not help Li Gongda's other lackeys, he would not have stopped at being the governor of a county. This time, the reason why Li Gongda was so concerned and anxious was because Huangnam County was not normal. Normally, this would be a bright political achievement. However, with the new Lingzhou general and a quagmire, wouldn't Huangnam County become a dazzling bird out of the forest? His Royal Highness was not moving forward in the quagmire. What was going on with him, Song Yan, who was high up on a branch? Even if he did not make a sound, it would make people feel that he was being noisy. Li Gongda's heart ached for the Lingzhou provincial governor. He just had to act dumb. It was not a crime. He was just afraid that because of Huangnam County, he would be hated by His Royal Highness, who had walked in front of Bailiang for the first time. Su Fengnian let out a breath and narrowed his eyes in deep thought. If nothing unexpected happened, Song Yen must have received one or two well-meaning secret letters from the administrator, telling this disciple to quickly tarnish his reputation. The people under him were too good at conducting themselves. As officials, they did not even care about doing things. What a headache. Now, with Zhong Hongwu as an example, no one would be stupid enough to go head-to-head with him, the Lingzhou general. As a result, they would all use soft methods to avoid the sharp edge, which would make people feel even more disgusted. Su Beiji was also not loyal. He did not get the Lingzhou provincial governor position and returned to Longqing Prefecture to watch the show. A copper coin that was no longer in circulation in the marketplace was slowly rolling between Su Fengnian's 5 fingers. Huyen Guanyin stared at the copper coin as it rolled back and forth, tediously, but she watched with great interest. It was to the point that when Su Fengnian raised his head to look at her, she did not notice. Su Fengnian put away the copper coin that the Crown Prince of Yanqi had returned to him and said softly, "Before New Year's Eve, I need to go back to Liangzhou. At that time, you can leave Lingzhou with me. Do you want to go back to the Beimang grasslands or go to Jiangnan to take a look?" Huyen Guanyin seemed to have realized something and asked, "With you?" Su Fengnian could not help but laugh. "Of course it's you alone. How can I leave?" She blinked her eyes and lowered her head again. Su Fengnian stretched out his finger and knocked her head. He laughed angrily. "The entire officialdom in Lingzhou is working together to play dirty with me. What, are you using what you have learned? Do you believe that I will chase you off the carriage?" She raised her head. She was still silent. Su Fengnian had a flash of inspiration. He was stunned and asked softly, "You just want me to talk to you?" Huyen Guanyin's beautiful face turned red. Su Fengnian held his stomach and laughed. He stretched out his hand and pinched her delicate cheeks. He then said helplessly, "Should I say that you are stupid or stupid? You are so quiet. Of course, I thought that you were not happy by my side. That's why I wanted you to go to a place where you can be happy. You have to know that on the grasslands, you dared to take the initiative to enter the tiger's mouth and ride on my body. Look at now, you are so lifeless." She was shy and wanted to say something. Su Fengnian sighed and let her sit sideways on his lap. He put one hand around her round shoulder and rested his chin on her head. He continued to flip through the letters. "This is called a saint's calmness. It is really unreasonable that I can't become a land immortal in this lifetime." The woman who was sitting sideways leaned forward, her chest squeezing one of his arms. Su Fengnian did not pay much attention to it at first. He only thought that she was uncomfortable. However, when his arm felt her restlessness, he quickly realized that it was not strange that he could not become a land immortal. Su Fengnian put the stack of letters on the ground. He only picked up one of them. His other hand slid into her collar. There was only a thin layer of satin between them. He held a ball of smooth fullness. His 5 fingers sank slightly. Huyen Guanyin's head leaned back and rested on his arm that was holding the letter. Her charming eyes were like silk. She raised her head and looked at this guy. She was at a loss and faintly let out a delicate nasal sound. Su Fengnian's sanctimonious appearance made people's hair stand on end. He pretended to be calm. In order not to make a sound, the ignorant woman bit a slender finger. This natural charm was extremely alluring. Su Fengnian looked down and asked himself, "Why don't I stop thinking about becoming a land immortal today?" Chapter 893. The carriage slowly came to a stop. Su Fengnian let go of Huyen Guanyin, who looked like she had been fished out of a water tank, and bent down to lift the curtain. He saw 3 riders stop by the side of the road. They did not wear any armor and were dressed in Jianghu martial arts attire. They were very clean and neat. However, unlike Jianghu martial artists, they all had a Bailiang saber at their waists. One of the young riders was particularly outstanding. His face was like jade, and there was a small but sturdy leather pouch hanging from the back of the horse. When Su Fengnian saw these familiar faces, he smiled and jumped off the carriage, stomping his feet. The weather was cold and the ground was frozen. The road was hard and the ground was hard. When the 3 riders saw His Royal Highness get off the carriage, they hurriedly flipped over and dismounted. Su Fengnian waved his hand, indicating that they did not need to bother with these complicated formalities. The 3 riders were all from the White Horse Righteous faction of the Phoenix Battalion. In Bailiang, they had vaguely become a small group of people with the most upright roots. Moreover, among the 3, Hong Shuwen had made a whole new level of respect during the battle at Iron Gate Pass. Wielding 2 sabers, he had killed 6 Imperial Guards and a Golden Saber Imperial bodyguard. The young rider, nicknamed His Royal Highness, was now Wang Zhi's deputy general. In name, he held the official title of Changshui Commandant. Last time, he had also shown his face at the Fish Dragon Gang in Longqing County. This time, he was transferred to the general's mansion in Lingzhou. Su Fengnian remembered that when he asked Wang Zhi for him, Wang Zhi's heart ached so much that he trembled. His expression was as if his parents had died. Su Fengnian asked Hong Shuwen for his warhorse. This Changshui commandant rode 1 horse with his fellow officers. 4 people, 3 riders, and 1 carriage, headed to Huangnam County. Su Fengnian smiled and asked, Hong Shuwen, did Ningame teach you the short halberd? Hong Shuwen, who always gave people the impression that he was a lone wolf in the desert, obediently held back a lot of his ruthlessness in front of His Royal Highness. He was actually a bit shy. He nodded and said, General Ning said that I have some talent with the halberd. When I get used to the short halberd, he will teach me the big halberd. Su Fengnian didn't deliberately use words to win people over. After chatting for a while, he urged his horse forward. When it was close to noon, they arrived at a small border town in Huangnam County. They led the horse forward. There were many New Year's Eve markets in the town, where the people of the nearby villages came to buy New Year's goods. Some county officials took the opportunity to light candles and talk about good books, helping their parents to get closer to the people. However, the people of Bailiang were valiant, so they only treated this kind of thing as a lively joke. The actions of leaving the young and going to other provinces and counties to embellish the official's career were also quite solemn and respectful. Those who talked about good books had to wear plain clothes. In Bailiang, there were suspicions that they were neither donkeys nor horses. Many officers who knew a little bit of literature and ink went up to the stage, and even some military officers who liked to be in the limelight rolled up their sleeves and went up to shake their heads. At this moment, Su Fengnian stood and watched from afar. Even though the inarticulate officials on the stage repeated the same old tune, they still made mistakes in their sentences. Some children with good memories who had long since memorized the words by heart started to make a fuss. When the children started to make a fuss, many adults around them also started to make a fuss. The officials lost face, so they glared and pointed their fingers, catching a man and scolding him. The man wasn't afraid of this little official's prestige and loudly cursed back. Then the man's wife also looked at him coquettishly and teased him a few times. The small official wasn't really angry, so he didn't filter his mouth and took the opportunity to tease the plump woman. However, the woman of Bailiang wasn't a thin-skinned lamp. A few bold and vulgar words made the small official's face turn red. In this kind of inappropriate noise, the rigid and pedantic talk about good books became a joyous occasion. Chapter 894. Su Fengnian looked around and had Hong Shuwen find a restaurant, as long as it was clean. After lunch, they continued toward Huangnam County. Su Fengnian had bought a large marten hat for Huyen Guanyin at the last minute. It covered her forehead, brows, and eyes so that her beauty would not be too shocking. The 3 retainers, who had infiltrated Bailiang's local officialdom after leaving the Phoenix Battalion, never looked sideways, especially Hong Shuwen. From beginning to end, it was as if Huyen Guanyin did not exist. Mounting their horses again, they turned from the bazaar onto a branch of a relay road. Other than the division of Bailiang's relay roads into provinces, counties, and counties on the surface, there were also a few hidden relay roads between many passes. Many of the seemingly cumbersome relay soldiers were supported with large amounts of money. If it were not for Bailiang's lack of financial resources, Su Shao would have made a big move. At the insistence of Zhang Julu, the Liang imperial court poured their taxes into the belly of the northern border. South of Jiangnan, most of the relay roads had been reduced to varying degrees. Regarding this, Zhang Julu sternly reprimanded a few local officials who were heading to the capital. After the incident, he changed his views slightly and immediately returned to normal. In addition, compared to the relay roads, Zhang Julu wanted to personally arrest the horse administration. The Grand Secretary did not have 3 heads and 6 arms, so he really did not have the energy to personally deal with the matters of the relay roads. Furthermore, the Gu Party had controlled the Ministry of War for a full 18 years. Not only did Zhang Julu meddle with the horse administration, he also directly took away the shockingly lucrative horse administration. The entire Ministry of War had long had complaints in their hearts. As a result, the popular palm eunuch Sun Tonglu had made a trip to Bailiang and returned to the capital to talk all night about the affairs of Bailiang that he had seen with his own eyes. After he mentioned the relay roads, the emperor sank into deep thought and speechlessness for a long time. Su Fengnian did not whip his horse to gallop quickly. Bailiang's relay roads were developed under the iron hooves of the Beimang warhorses. It was a double-edged sword that could ensure that the troops, horses, and provisions could move quickly. At the same time, if the 350,000 border troops defeated the Bailiang cavalry, then they could cross the border in one spurt of energy. Without a doubt, the road to the south would be unimpeded. The reason the Zhao family had tolerated Su Shao time and time again, even turning a blind eye to the salt and iron matter, and not making things too difficult for the water transport over the years, was not that they were not worried that Bailiang's door would open and bring disaster to the Central Plains. In the future, when Qin Jibao was in theft as a prince and entered Shu, it was also because they did not think that Su Fengnian would be in charge of Bailiang's armaments. The court had prepared for the worst. In case the Su family in Bailiang could not support the northwest of the Zhao family, at least there was Qin Jibao's Shu land as a second line of defense. When one reached the level of Su Shao and Zhang Julu, conspiracies and machinations actually became meaningless. In the end, the one who had power still ruled the world. Su Fengnian waved his hand at Hong Shuwen and said, "Commandant Hong, today Bailiang has an abundance of meritorious and dishonorable officials. Not to mention lieutenants and commandants, there are even generals all over the streets. If I remember correctly, Bailiang and Liang share the same law. The civil and military official ranks and dishonorable official ranks add up to as many as 74 ranks. In addition to those scattered titles, there are simply too many to count. If one day I take back all of them, or eliminate most of them, tell me, what do you think will happen to Bailiang's officialdom?" Hong Shuwen hesitated for a moment. Su Fengnian laughed and said, "There's no harm in saying it directly." Hong Shuwen said in a low voice, "Your Highness, then our Bailiang will really become a pot of porridge. If the people at the rear are not stable, those who work for the generals at the border will all have families to feed and will also not be at peace. For example, in Hong Shuwen's family, father was conferred the rank of a 6th-rank cloud cavalry officer because of his military exploits. Second uncle has some knowledge and was also conferred the rank of a 6th-rank Confucian scholar, which is considered not too common in Bailiang. These titles with ranks but no official rank are only used to give face to the elders and old brothers when they gather. If they really want to use these things to make a profit or to plunder the land, they can't do it even if they want to. If they were taken away all of a sudden, the old fellows' hearts would turn cold. Furthermore, it would be even worse than losing a few thousand taels of silver. Your Highness, I dare to speak from the bottom of my heart. This time, I heard from the elders in my family that a few thousand scholars from other places have come. They are all here to steal the old Bailiang's rice bowl. This time, when I went to the Lingzhou General's manor from Longqing County, I also heard a lot of rumors. They are all unfavorable to your Highness." Su Fengnian nodded and said with a smile, "Many people are working together to fan the flames of evil and make the stove that is Lingzhou's officialdom very warm. I'm afraid there are still a lot of people who are conscientiously adding firewood to the stove. This year's end in Bailiang is very different from previous years. It really isn't cold at all." Hong Shuwen was a bit puzzled. His Royal Highness could still smile? Because Hong Shuwen was His Highness' close official, the local prestige of the Hong family did not join the crowd this time. They closed their doors and refused to receive guests. They did not care about disputes and were already isolated and alienated by many families who were originally on good terms with them. If he wanted Hong Shuwen to go into battle to kill the enemy, he would definitely not hesitate. Hong Shuwen always felt that men should shed their blood on the battlefield. Before he became a general that brought glory to his ancestors, he had already thought about where he would die on the battlefield. However, if he wanted to criticize the current situation, it would really be asking for his life. Since His Highness asked about this foul and disgraceful matter, this ruthless Hong who once dared to slap his concubine mother half to death in the family could only say what he wanted to say. Su Fengnian slowly said, prescribing the right medicine for the right illness has a difference in urgency. Hong Shuwen, let me tell you something first. I plan to set up 14 rank 5 captains based on the geography of Beiliang. Captains are named after the important passes in the territory. If nothing goes wrong, there will only be 3 in Lingzhou. Wang Ji will go to the Maikong mountain pass that borders western Shu to guard Lazikou. As for the other 2, one will be given to Han Laozhan, who is temporarily the deputy general of Lingzhou. The remaining one will be fought over by the entire Lingzhou. I don't believe that no smart people will take the bait for such a big piece of meat. As long as you become a captain, it means that you can stand out from the large group of captains who only deal with trivial matters. It would not be an exaggeration to call you a feudal lord. As long as someone is willing to lead an internal conflict, the following matters will be much easier to handle. Originally, I wanted to give Han Laoshan's position to you. However, you don't have much military achievements. After all, Han Laozhan has Su Zhao's banner behind him. He can convince people wherever he goes, but you can't. Therefore, I will put you in the Lingzhou general's manor to accumulate experience. Although I can't use a quick and decisive method to deal with the Lingzhou officialdom, if I don't see blood at all, it won't make sense. When the time comes, I will need you. Beiliang's local captains don't have many chances to kill people, so don't treat it lightly. In the future, when I leave Lingzhou, you will most likely have to help the new provincial governor Su Beiji. I believe you know my relationship with provincial governor Su Beiji. I believe you know about my relationship with provincial governor Su. I'll say the ugly words first. If anything happens to him, you, Hong Shuwen, won't be able to compensate for that head on your shoulder. Hong Shuwen subconsciously wiped his neck and chuckled, anyway, I will do whatever your highness says without any objections. However, can I ask your highness for a favor? Su Fengnian laughed and scolded, why are you the same as Wang Ji? If you have something to say it quickly. Hong Shuwen said softly, your highness, in the future, if there is a war at the border, you can't forget about Hong Shuwen. Su Fengnian asked, 20 years ago, so many people joined the army because there was no peaceful life anywhere. They were all aiming for glory and wealth. If they took a gamble, they might be able to get an official position. However, it's different now. Why did you, Hong Shuwen, give up being a stable official and insist on risking your life at the border? Is it very impressive to have your head tied to your belt? Or do you think that you can't be a high-ranking official on the ground? As long as Hong Shuwen grinned, he was naturally sinister. Hong Shuwen is different from others. I just can't get used to living a leisurely and happy life. Especially after hanging out with your highness, I feel uncomfortable if I don't kill people for a day. I would go to the brothel to find soft and tender women to have fun with. After I'm satisfied, I would feel sick of it and couldn't help but want to break their necks. I don't think this illness can be cured, so I can only go to the border and kill people. Su Fengnian smiled and didn't comment. In a time of peace, the people slept. When they woke up, their homes were still there and people were still alive. They worked hard every day. If there were 1 or 2 good thoughts, then this was a good world. In the eyes of the people, Hong Shuwen was definitely not a good person. However, without people like Hong Shuwen and Li Hanlin, Beiliang's good world wouldn't last long. Chapter 895. Because this chapter has more than 6,000 words, it's a bit late. The next chapter is estimated to be around 7 in the morning. Huangnam County's Governor Song Yan's house was empty and sparse. There were few servants and it was cold and cheerless. In fact, this house was one of the top high-rise houses in Huangnam County. With Song Yan's family's wealth, it was impossible to live in it, let alone buy it. It was difficult to even rent it. However, because it was a haunted house that no one dared to take over, it fell into the hands of Song Yan, who had nothing to do with it. The previous head of the house was an old general who retired from the border and wanted to spend time with his grandchildren. He was the right-hand man of General Yan Wenluan. He was a meritorious general who could drink wine with the king of Bailiang when he was young. It was unknown why, on a snowy night, more than 70 people in the house were killed. Regardless of whether they were women or children, they were all beheaded. It was extremely tragic. Until now, it was still a big unsolved case on the streets of Bailiang. Some said that it was the work of Lulan bandits. Some said that it was the work of political opponents who still worked in the Bailiang Frontier Army. No matter what, the house, which was rumored to be empty every snowy night, was empty for many years. Later, Song Yan, who did not believe in ghosts and gods, became the head of Huangnam County. He did not do any water or land Taoist rites, nor did he set up any altars or rituals. He just moved into the house with his family and lived in peace these years. Although Song Yan admired the power of magic, he had another nickname that was related to Huang Lao, Kagan Taoist. The wife of the prefectural governor passed away early, leaving behind an unbetrothed only daughter called Song Huangmei. In Huangnam County, she rode a horse and brandished her whip, carrying a saber and a bow. She was extremely valiant and formidable, not losing to the rangers of Bailiang. When Song Yan noticed that his daughter, who had always regarded applying rouge as the worst evil in the world, began to ask him for money, not to buy bows and arrows, but to secretly buy a lot of rouge and face powder. Song Yan had bumped into his daughter several times in the residence, but his daughter did not wipe her face clean. Song Yan was happy to see this, and he never exposed his daughter's clumsy cover-up. The library of the prefectural governor's residence was adjacent to the garden. Song Yan held a book and quietly stood by the window. In the garden, his daughter and 2 maidservants who were as close as sisters were laughing and talking happily. Her voice was particularly crisp. Song Yan, who was almost middle-aged, smiled slightly. His daughter deliberately spoke so loudly, wasn't it to let the young man who had been standing outside the wall for more than an hour hear her? Song Yan had asked someone to investigate the young man's family background. He was born at the bottom of the market and was full of vigor. Therefore, he relied on a mediocre sect in Huangnan County. In several gang fights, he fought at the risk of his life and became the direct disciple of a sect leader. He had been honed in the ways of the world for many years and treated people better than those arrogant disciples in Huangnan County. Song Yan once visited the young man incognito in his spare time and drank tea with him at the same table. They chatted casually for a while. The young man rarely pretended to say something shocking. He talked in a simple manner and had a good nature. Therefore, Song Yan silently took a step back and let it be. Song Yan himself was not from an aristocratic family and he was born in a poor alley. Therefore, he knew that it was not easy for a young man from a poor family to stand out. However, if this young man was a scholar, even if he had no hope of becoming an official, Song Yan would have invited him to the mansion and generously recognized him as his son-in-law. However, Song Yan did not think highly of this young man from a gang who licked blood on the blade. At most, he would not oppose it. It was too difficult for him, the governor of Huangnan County, to take the initiative to show his goodwill. Therefore, Song Yan did not think highly of this young man. Song Yan saw his daughter sneakily walk towards the wall of the courtyard, not forgetting to look around. It was clear that she was too thin-skinned and was afraid of being caught by her father. She also knew that her father was famous for his ability to see the big picture from small clues and was not easy to fool. Song Yan could only smile bitterly and retreat from the window to near the bookshelf. Song Yan placed the Taoist work, 5 Bugs, back to its original position on the bookshelf and sat back down on the mountain-like desk. There was a bronze incense burner on the desk that was used to burn incense to refresh the mind. Song Yen glanced at the 2 secret letters that had been sent from the administrator's residence one after another. His face was expressionless. He reached out and stroked the patterns on the bronze that implied exorcism. Song Yen closed his eyes and felt the burning sensation on his fingertips. He slowly withdrew his hand. He did not care about what his teacher, Li Gongda, had said in the letter. On the contrary, this amazing feat in Huangnam County was a sign that Song Yen was going to establish himself as a servant of the Li family. Following Li Gongda's high rise to 2nd rank, Song Yan's status also rose. However, 4th rank prefect was already the limit. Now that Bailiang had a change of dynasty, Song Yen knew that his impression of the king of Bailiang was very poor. If he did not do something now, he would not be able to advance in the officialdom for the next 10 or 20 years. 1 step late, 1 step late, 1 step late. Song Yen, who was in the prime of his life, was full of ambition. He did not want to follow behind others and eat the leftovers. However, right now, Song Yen was not sure if that Lingzhou general had the magnanimity to personally come and see him, this stubborn and smelly stone of officialdom, for his courage. Just as Song Yen was deep in thought, the sound of his daughter's shouts came from the garden outside the building. Song Yen helplessly stood up. This daughter of his did not have the slightest bit of femininity. How could she marry into a good family in the future? Song Yen did not respond. He walked down the stairs and took a detour to enter the garden through the back door. He saw that his teacher's daughter, Li Fuzhen, had actually rushed to Huangnam County. There was also an unfamiliar face beside her. With Song Yan's experience, he immediately guessed the identity of this person. It was the cold man that Li Fuzhen admired, Guo Fufeng. Song Yen did not have much of a good or bad impression of this person. Seeing his daughter, Song Huangmei, sizing up this man, Song Yen gave him a meaningful glance. Guo Fufeng, on the other hand, was very calm. He respectfully and reverently bowed deeply to Governor Song. Song Yen nodded with a smile and did not say anything. It could not be considered warm and polite. Even if this person became the administrator's son-in-law in the future, Song Yen still did not think highly of him. Furthermore, with Song Yan's status, even if Guo Fufeng rose step by step, if he wanted to stand side by side with Song Yen, it would take him at least 20 years of hard work. Li Fuzhen held on to Song Huangmei, who was a few years younger than her, but her expression was nervous. This was the first time she had brought Guo Fufeng to appear in front of her father's students. Others were fine, perhaps they would give her some face as the administrator's daughter, but Song Yen was known among the Li family's students for being unreasonable. He was very afraid that the governor would directly order them to leave with a straight face. This time, he had rushed to Huangnam County to meet Uncle Song in secret. Her father really had no choice. She did not know how Guo Fufeng had gotten the news and had talked to her for half a day, telling her many heartfelt good intentions. Only then did Li Fuzhen hesitantly bring him along to the Song manor. She had a good relationship with Song Huangmei since they were young. She had always been treated as a younger sister by this girl. Everyone knew that Governor Song doted on his daughter, and this girl also had a dark relationship with a Jianghu boy whose background was even worse than Guo Fufeng's. This was also the key reason why Li Fuzhen dared to have Guo Fufeng formally reveal himself in Lingzhou's officialdom. However, thinking of this, Li Fuzhen had an indescribable sorrow that she had no one to talk to. When did she have to be so scheming? However, seeing that Uncle Song's expression was tranquil, and at the very least, he did not speak ill of Guo Fufeng, Li Fuzhen was slightly relieved. The heartless Song Huangmei did not know why the fearless sister Li's palms were sweaty. The group of people went inside the house to sit around the stove. Song Huangmei used the excuse that she needed to scoop some charcoal and ran out of the house like a wisp of smoke. How could Song Yen not know that she was going to say goodbye to her sweetheart? He could not help but make a commotion of folding a chair and standing on top of the wall. Song Yen had just sat down when he received a few name cards from the steward. They were all scholars from Huangnam County who came to ask for advice on how to help the people. In reality, they were just here to pay their respects to the prefect so that they could get familiar with him. Song Yen let the steward return the letters and also gave back a few books from the library. These people did not get to see the books, but they came in high spirits and returned in high spirits. It was not uncommon for them to show off to their peers. Song Yen casually dealt with this small matter and looked at Li Fuzhen with a smile. Uncle Song's salary has been used to buy books. The house is almost full. It will be difficult to eat fish and meat here. Li Fuzhen had never been good at socializing, so she just smiled. Guo Fufeng did not want to be a foil and took the initiative to say, the scholars of the past dynasties loved books as much as their lives. They believed that borrowing books was like borrowing a wife. It was better to directly give books to people, just like how a famous scholar gave a beautiful concubine. It was passed down as a beautiful story. The prefect is well versed in the samadhi. Song Yen looked indifferent and turned a deaf ear. He did not agree. Guo Fufeng was thick-skinned and did not feel awkward at all. Li Fuzhen, who was slightly relieved, was a little restless again. She was afraid that Guo Fufeng did not know the rules and taboos of officialdom and would annoy the indifferent Song Yen. Fortunately, Song Huangmei brought a pot of black charcoal and helped her out. Song Huangmei spoke without restraint in her own home. She frowned and said, "Father, Taya just told me that there were a few outsiders on the street outside the wall. They have been patient for some time. What are they doing in the empty alley in the middle of winter? Could they be bad people?" Song Yen laughed softly and said, "The road is open to the sky. Even if father is the prefect, I can't control the footsteps of the pedestrians. Some people are willing to suffer the cold outside the wall. Even if they stay for a few hours, father can't use the official's hat on my head to chase them away." Song Huangmei understood the meaning in her father's words. Her face suddenly turned red and she lowered her head to fiddle with the charcoal fire. Chapter 896. The housekeeper stood at the door in a panic. Song Yen got up and walked out of the room. After hearing the news, he did not say anything. He turned around and told Li Fuzhen that he had some urgent business to attend to. He then asked Song Huangmei to help take care of the guests. After the governor left in a hurry, his footsteps gradually disappeared. Guo Fufeng lowered his head and reached out to warm the charcoal. His face was a bit gloomy. Guo Fufeng raised his head to look at Li Fuzhen and the governor's daughter, who each had their own merits, whispering intimately to each other. Guo Fufeng's smile quickly turned into a warm one. He was not displeased by the governor's neglect of the governor. After Li Fuzhen and Song Huangmei were done talking about women's whispers, Li Fuzhen wanted to say something but stopped. She caught a glimpse of Guo Fufeng's look from the corner of her eye and said, "Huangmei, do you know that there are many unethical and obscene temples in Huangnan County? Someone told my father about it. They said that not only did Uncle Song not ban it, but he allowed it to flourish. These temples were actually secretly manipulated by someone and became a means to amass wealth. It is a crime against public morals and morals. I came here this time to inform Uncle Song. I came here to inform Uncle Song." Song Huangmei was shocked. She then narrowed her eyes and smiled. "What do you mean by ruining public morals? Our Bailiang is like this. What is there to ruin? No matter how bad it is, it can't be that bad. I think those bastards who purposely slandered my father must have nothing better to do. Either they are afraid that my father's position is too stable and if my father doesn't move, they won't be able to climb up the ranks. If they don't get promoted, they won't be able to get rich. In the end, it's all because of money. I heard in the restaurant that a few counties in Lingzhou are pointing their spears at the Lingzhou general and purposely muddying the waters. Only our Huangnam County is peaceful. My father has become a target." Li Fuzhen's lips curled into a bitter smile. Guo Fufeng glanced at the girl and was a bit surprised. Song Huangmei glanced at the elegant Guo Fufeng from the corner of her eyes and said to Li Fuzhen, "Sister, Brother Han Lin is really something now. He is so successful that he has become the leader of the crossbowmen in the upper reaches of the border. I heard that he has killed hundreds of Beimang barbarians. There are so many heads on the back of his horse that they cannot fit. Is Brother Hanlin coming home for the New Year this year? If he comes back, please remember to invite him to my house. I have to tell Brother Hanlon about my endless admiration for him. Men have to be like Brother Hanlon and go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. Otherwise, they are not men. Hearing these words, Guo Fufeng sneered in his heart, but his face remained calm. Li Fuzhen carefully glanced at Guo Fufeng, then turned his head and forced a smile. Let's go out for a walk. Guo Fufeng naturally stayed behind. After the two sisters left, Li Fuzhen reached out and pinched Song Huangmei's ear. Stupid girl, you dare to lecture your sister? Didn't I clearly write in your letter that you should not give him a dirty face? Look at you. Song Huangmei curled her lips and said, anyway, I didn't like that person at first sight. My father said that a scholar shouldn't be too enslaved and jealous. Such a scholar won't have a great future. I think the man surnamed Gua is not lacking in either of these two problems. Sister, listen to me. You refused our northern young devil incarnate at that time, which was such a great feat to vent your anger. Why are you becoming more and more useless in the end? If I had known it would be like this, it would have been better to follow the lecher surnamed Su and become the concubine of the king of Fan in the future. Our administrator will be grinning from ear to ear. Besides, Brother Hanlon was able to turn over a new leaf. Maybe one day that Su guy will suddenly wake up and really go to the border to kill the enemy. Of course, I think that with that guy's nature, it is as difficult as ascending to the heavens for him to kill people with his own hands like Brother Hanlon. He only dares to bully women. I really don't know what those people who say good things about him are thinking. What Beiliang soldiers sent to the capital? What Beimang soldiers? What Beimang soldiers? What Liang Lake? Who would believe that? Li Fuzhen knocked hard on the forehead of the chattering Song Huangmei and angrily glared at her. No one will think you are mute if you don't talk. The two walked to the corner and saw a group of people walking quietly on the bluestone path of the mansion in the distance. Except for the prefect Song Yen, who was wearing official uniform without a sword, most of the other men had eye-catching Beiliang swords hanging on their waists, which added a bit of a cold winter atmosphere. Song Huangmei, who liked to join in the fun, quickly pulled Li Fuzhen's sleeve and said in surprise, Hey, who is this handsome guy with gray hair and murderous aura? Sister Fuzhen, look, my father is such a proud person. When he walks, he is actually one shoulder away from him. No, I have to find an excuse to pay a visit to this hero. Li Fuzhen's expression was complicated and obscure. In the end, Song Huangmei still had some loyalty. She did not leave her sister Fuzhen alone. She was different from the ordinary girls from the noble families. Since young, she was obsessed with playing with guns and sticks. In order to secretly keep a Beiliang sword, she had been nagging her father for many years. In the end, Song Yen had to agree to give her one when she got married. This was because there was an iron law in Beiliang. As long as one was out of the army, even a general was not allowed to secretly wear a Beiliang sword. Even if one was bestowed one was not allowed to take it out. Of course, whether one abided by the law or not was another matter. Many playboys in Beiliang were proud of wearing a cold sword. As long as they were not exposed or seen, most of them would be fine. However, there was a world of difference between carrying a sword privately and carrying one openly. So far, no civil official in Beiliang was qualified to carry a Beiliang sword. This was like the honor of carrying a sword in the palace in the capital. Even though Song Huangmei was the daughter of the prefect, she still admired those soldiers who relied on their own ability to carry a northern cold saber. The disciple of the gang that she fell in love with also swore to her that in the future, before he married her, he would carry a northern cold saber and visit his father-in-law's house to propose marriage. Chapter 897. Song Yen led these uninvited guests into the meeting room at the back of the house. He dismissed the servants and personally poured tea for them. He was very polite, but there was not a hint of fear on his face. Even if the young man sitting in front of him was His Royal Highness of Beiliang and was the new Lingzhou general who had appeared out of nowhere. Su Fengnian took the teacup and said calmly, back then, Beimang's Jianghu wanted to infiltrate Beiliang under the orders of Spider Web Li Mibi. They specifically targeted the weak civil servants and used this to disrupt Beiliang's foundation. In the end, before they could even enter the country, they were all killed at the border. However, there were still some who managed to slip through the net and sneak into Yu and Liang provinces. At that time, to appease the people, many of the incidents were covered up. Lingzhou was relatively better, but the tragedy in this mansion still happened. Over the years, Beiliang's spies have mostly focused on Beimang's men of sacrifice. Every now and then, there would be a seemingly random murder case, but the people did not know about it. Song Yan smiled. Last year, there was a murder case in Huangnam County. It startled a group of cavalry from another county to cross the border to kill. They uprooted a gang and almost killed the entire family. At that time, I did not know the secret behind it and almost wanted to personally stop it and demand an explanation from that famous school's commander. Later, a spy under General Chu sent me a military order. Only then did I know the danger. Su Fengnian said, Huangnam County is known as Jiangnan beyond the Great Wall. It is where Beiliang's granary is located. As the granary of our Lingzhou, Sir Song must have a heavy responsibility on your shoulders. Song Yan's tone was calm as he replied, It is my duty. Su Fengnian sneered and said, It is also the duty of the prefectural governor to forbid all unsuitable offerings in the county. Lord Song has always been known to be swift and decisive in Lingzhou. How is he neglecting his duty? There were 3 ghost temples in Huangnam County, and the memorial tablets enshrined there were neither the souls of Beiliang heroes nor the gods conferred titles by the imperial court. It was obvious that this was against the etiquette system. However, one of the couplets was written by Lord Song. Could it be that Lord Song was relying on the protection of the administrator to knowingly violate the rules? I've heard that Lord Song is fond of collecting books. You've collected more than 60 unique ancient books, and they're quite expensive. I wonder how many incense offerings did that illegal temple give to Lord Song this year? Song Yan drank a mouthful of tea and said, It's only 500 taels, not worth mentioning. There were many rare books that were coveted, but they were not able to get them. It is a pity. Su Fengnian smiled. Excessive offerings in the territory, embezzling more than 300 taels, the punishment for these 2 crimes is the death penalty. Does Lord Song want to use your head to help me establish my prestige in Lingzhou? Song Yan was indeed the smelly and hard rock in the latrine pit of Lingzhou. He actually smiled, Since your highness has brought a knife and I have admitted my crimes, then it's just a matter of 1 knife. Su Fengnian put down the teacup. You and I both know that you have disobeyed the wishes of the administrator. You want to come out of the Lingzhou officialdom so that I can take note of you, the person who once angered Su Xiao. As long as you're willing to start an uprising in Huangnan County and let outsiders misunderstand that the administrator has made up his mind to lower his head to the general of Lingzhou, many officials would tactfully restrain their petty actions. After all, if they were really dealt with later, those who came up with the idea would clean their hands and feet while those who did the dirty work themselves would have to bear the consequences. Although the law did not punish the majority, who did not know how to punish the majority? After all, there would always be a few unlucky chickens that would be picked out. In fact, these crafty and slippery petty officials were also afraid of the consequences from the bottom of their hearts. Song Yan, do you think that without your Huangnam County, I will be stuck in the mud? Even if I go ashore, I will be covered in mud and can only run to Liangzhou to complain to Su Xiao. Song Yan shook his head. Your Highness does not lack methods to break out of the situation, you just lack time. After all, even if your Highness kills randomly, you will be able to kill until they are not convinced. In the future, when the military confidants are all in place and some local officials and scholars from Lingzhou keep each other in check, the Lingzhou officialdom will slowly be tamed. However, your Highness does not seem to have such ruthlessness and decisiveness, and you cannot wait. On this point, after your Highness personally came to Huangnam County to find me, Song Yan was even more certain. Seeing that Su Fengnian did not speak, Song Yan continued to speak slowly. If I become the Lingzhou provincial governor, I can be a vanguard for your Highness to get rid of the filth and also appease the administrator on the surface. Both sides will have a way out and I can secretly weaken Sir Li's control in Lingzhou. Su Fengnian smiled and planned on what the prefectural governor would say. Prefectural governor, you overestimate yourself. The provincial governor of Lingzhou can only be Su Beiji, not you, Song Yan. At most, you can only be the governor of Lingzhou. However, I can tell you something straightforward. When Su Beiji becomes the administrator of Bailiang, you have hopes of becoming the Lingzhou provincial governor. However, that is still too early and you will have to wait. This is because Bailiang will not touch Sir Li, who has done meritorious deeds without any mistakes. The Su and Li families have accumulated 2 generations of incense. Not to mention Sir Li's hard work, just my relationship with Li Hanlin is enough for the administrator to enjoy being an official. Furthermore, it is better to not do something as immoral as killing the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness. Of course, if you, Song Yan, really have the ability, with Su Beiji in front of you, even if you can't become the Lingzhou provincial governor, there are still 2 provincial governor seats for me to consider. There are 30 provinces in Liang. Let's not talk about Su Beiji, who is an anomaly. Count them, how many of them are under 40? Sir Song, you should be content. Song Yan's expression was uncertain. In the end, Su Fengnian said something that made Song Yan not know whether to laugh or cry. Also, there are many people who want to be promoted to Lingzhou provincial governor. If you, Song Yan, want to be promoted, you have to give me half of the books in the building. Many scholars have come to Bailiang and I can use them to buy people's hearts. Without waiting for the governor to nod, Su Fengnian stood up and muttered to himself, Motherf **********, no wonder so many people want to be the emperor. They can be so righteous when they are selling their positions for money. Chapter 898. It was probably because this self-proclaimed Lingzhou general was too direct that Song Yan, who had been immersed in officialdom for many years, found it refreshing. At the same time, he also felt a fear that the governor did not want to admit. For a moment, he was speechless and did not make a sound. The tea had already turned cold, but Song Yan still sat there and swirled the cup lid. Su Fengnian did not care about this kind of harmless rudeness. There was a secret report that Li Fuzhen had also come to Huangnam County. He did not want to meet her. If that happened, it would be difficult for both sides, so he prepared to leave this manor that was indeed filled with a gloomy aura. Song Yan was not so conceited that he would not move from his chair. He stood up and sent him to the door. Su Fengnian told him that he would stay in the county capital until tomorrow morning. Song Yan nodded his head and stood in place for a long time before walking back to the chair with heavy steps. He gently pressed one hand on the armrest of the iron pear-wood chair. The steward, who had been rejected by the honored guest of the manor, carefully stood at the door. He could not help but be worried. Everyone knew that the heir of Bailiang was a strange and absurd person. Now that he had placed the title of Lingzhou general on his head, who knew if he was going to openly attack Lingzhou? His master had better not be the first. Song Yan patted the armrest and turned around to say, "Go to Wild Ape House and organize 2,000 books. Then have General Tao send them to the Lingzhou general's manor today." The steward could not help but ask, "Master, how will you divide them?" Song Yan's face was filled with helplessness, as if salt had been poured onto his wound. He sighed and said, "Other than the 40 or so rare books that are kept in yellow rosewood boxes, choose the best ones and move them out of Wild Ape House." The steward made a sound of acknowledgement and quickly left. Song Yan rubbed his forehead and said with a bitter smile, "It really is more painful than marrying off a daughter." Su Fengnian brought Su Yanbing and Hong Shuwen along the small path of the Song Manor. Huyen Guanyin did not enter the manor and remained in the carriage outside the manor. The reason why Su Fengnian chose Huangnam County's Song Yan was mainly because this prefect was quite knowledgeable, but he did not have the temperament of an old scholar. Back then, Song Yan had purposely criticized Su Zhao's unclear rewards and punishments in public. It was just a ploy in the officialdom to attract Su Zhao's attention. It was not really Song Yan who did not understand the rules of the officialdom. It was a pity that he met Su Zhao, the king of Bailiang, who did not know how to read the customs. Of course, Su Fengnian also began to suspect that Su Zhao had intentionally left this stubborn Lingzhou rock for him to subdue. While Su Fengnian was thinking, he raised his head and saw a tall servant girl from the manor. She was dressed simply and strangely had a long sword at her waist. She had an unfriendly expression towards them. After she blocked their path, she pressed down on the hilt of her sword and asked sternly, "Who are you? You had bad intentions on the street outside earlier." Why did you barge into the backyard without permission? Young people who did not wear armor but carried cold swords in Lingzhou were definitely those hedonistic sons who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. She had followed the young miss and taught them a lesson countless times. These wastrels who only knew how to rely on their parents' achievements to do evil did not have any memory at all. This time, they actually dared to barge into the prefectural governor's manor to show off. Su Fengnian glanced at her. Hong Shuwen behind him was eager to try. His eyes were dark and cold, and he was about to use the scabbard to knock this girl unconscious. Su Fengnian threw a look at Hong Shuwen, indicating that he should not cause trouble. He smiled and explained to her, I am a guest of your manor. The carriage is parked at the back door and I am about to leave. It is not what you think. Barging into an official's manor is not a small crime. I do not have the courage to come to the prefectural governor's manor to cause trouble. Su Fengnian finished speaking and was about to walk around her. He did not expect her to take 2 steps to the side and block his path again. Hong Shuwen rolled his eyes. This girl really did not know how the word death was written. The maidservant said stiffly, No, you have to tell me your name. I'll ask the steward, and only after I confirm that there's no mistake will I let you go. Otherwise, if you're a daring book thief or a bandit who intends to commit murder, Hong Shuwen could not help but scold, scram. The maidservant, whose temper was not much better than Hong Shuwen's, was furious and wanted to draw her sword. However, what scared her out of her wits was that no matter how much strength she used, her sword could not leave the scabbard. It was as if it was nailed to the scabbard. Su Fengnian knew that Hong Shuwen did not have this ability, but to Su Yanbing, who had once suppressed Wang Xiu, it was just a small trick. Su Fengnian directly brushed past her. Su Yanbing, who was as calm as an ancient well, followed closely behind. Hong Shuwen had a mischievous expression on his face as he swaggered past her. The maidservant, who had practiced swordsmanship for many years, only thought that she had seen a ghost in broad daylight. She did not dare to be rash and turned her head to look at the 3 people in a daze. Only when she found that they had shadows did she breathe a sigh of relief. She was really afraid that they were the wandering ghosts who had died tragically in this mansion. The maidservant no longer dared to move, but there was someone in the mansion who was still lingering around. His sword was like a rainbow as it flew straight towards them. Su Fengnian frowned. Hong Shuwen was happy that someone had bumped into his blade. However, with His Highness present, he did not act too ruthlessly. He quickly took out his blade and used the scabbard to stab the assassin's chest. Then, he kicked the man's abdomen. Hong Shuwen seemed to feel that he had let the man off easy. He quickly walked over and was about to fiercely step on the assassin's face when Su Fengnian spoke, That's enough. Hong Shuwen took back his boots that were only an inch away from the man's face. He put on his Bailiang blade again and turned around to walk towards His Royal Highness, who had a bodhisattva's heart. The maidservant, who had previously failed to draw her sword, cried out with a sobbing tone, Miss. The maidservant, who had been poked and stepped on by Hong Shuwen, struggled to sit up. She pointed at the fallen sword to the maidservant. Then, she shouted towards the backs of the 3 people with difficulty, Hey, 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 the one with gray hair, don't be in a hurry to leave. I have something to ask you. Chapter 899. But to Song Huangmei's disappointment, that guy just left without looking back. She didn't know if he was afraid that her father would help her vent her anger, or he just didn't want to talk to her. But Song Huangmei, who had the spirit of the Jianghu, didn't have the thought of being unforgiving. She was in the wrong to use her sword to keep them, and she didn't think that the other party was unreasonable. Song Huangmei's skill was inferior, and she was convinced. Although Song Huangmei's face was pale from the pain, her curiosity was far greater than her anger. But the maid Iron Cliff was not so open-minded. She helped the young miss pick up the long sword, and after helping the young miss stand up, she knew that she was not the opponent of that group of people, but she still wanted to fight. Song Huangmei grabbed her arm and squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying, Iron Cliff, don't go. They are really guests of the house, and my father personally welcomed them. Ouch, it hurts, I can't talk anymore. The maid Iron Cliff cried, Young miss, how can there be such guests, I have to reason with the master. Song Huangmei, on the other hand, sucked in a breath of cold air, and smiled with satisfaction. Iron Cliff, we finally met a master. Go, help me to Sister Fusion. After I catch my breath, I will ask my father who that guy is. Su Fengnian walked to the front of the carriage and said to Hong Shuwen, Huangnam County has a few Beimang spies that have been rooted here for many years. Seeing that you have nothing to do, you can go and work with our spies tonight, but we won't record your military merits. Remember, you have to follow their rules. If I know that you killed people, don't think about getting involved in this kind of thing in the future. Hong Shuwen nodded vigorously, his eyes were burning, and he licked the corner of his mouth with a smile that was terrifying. Guo Fufeng sat alone in front of the brazier in the room. He did not feel that he was being looked down upon. He even had the leisure to look at the decorations in the room. If he did not have such shrewdness and broad-mindedness, how could he have made Li Fusion, one of the few wealthy women in Beiliang, fall in love with him? Guo Fufeng was not dissatisfied with his current situation. Guo Fufeng believed that his plan was flawless. If his brother-in-law Li Hanlin continued to be an unruly hedonist, it would be fine. Guo Fufeng had never been a rigid scholar and did not mind helping Li Hanlin do evil. Now that Li Hanlin had joined the border, it was even better. In the future, when Li Hanlin returned to his hometown with glory, he would most likely take the path of a military official. A family also had to walk on two legs. Wouldn't the path of a civil official be filled by him, the virtuous son-in-law of the Li family? The two of them helped each other. With Li Gongda, who had only been the administrator for less than 2 years, guiding him, the Li family would naturally be prosperous. Guo Fufeng even thought of the scene where he would meet the new Prince Liang in the future. Now, what was a little disdain? Even Li Fusion did not know that two officials highly regarded by the administrator had approached Guo Fufeng in private. They were just short of calling each other brothers. Guo Fufeng narrowed his eyes and looked at the charcoal fire in the brazier. This trip to Huangnam County was a secret. Li Fusion was thin-skinned and inarticulate. He still needed to rely on him to solve his father-in-law's problems. Huangnam County was the place of prosperity for the administrator. If there was a fire in the backyard, it would be a topic of ridicule in the prince's household. Guo Fufeng believed that Song Yan knew the severity of the situation. Previously, he was neither cold nor warm to him. Li Fusion sat down beside him. Guo Fufeng saw that there was no one around and said softly, I have my own plans on how to persuade Sir Song. Fusion, you don't have to worry. Also, according to what you said, the man that Miss Song likes is a disciple of a second-rate gang in Huangnam County. If there's a chance, the four of us can find an elegant restaurant to have a meal. Although I'm not a member of the Jianghu, I know a lot of Jianghu stories. I'm not afraid to have nothing to say to that person. Li Fusion suddenly asked, Fufeng, aren't you tired? Guo Fufeng smiled and asked back, tired? Li Fusion turned her head and did not look at him. Guo Fufeng hesitated for a moment and did not hold her hand. He placed his hands on the brazier and enjoyed the warmth. His voice was warm as he said, there's nothing to be tired about. In order for us to have comfortable days in the future, it's natural for me to be tired. One day, I will let Lingzhou and even Beiliang remember the name Guo Fufeng. Li Fusion did not feel tired when she went on a hunger strike with her parents in order to be with him. She did not know why, but when she heard the bold words of the man she admired, she felt tired. Guo Fufeng said softly, Fusion, don't worry. Sooner or later, I will let your father and Hanlin acknowledge me. Li Fusion nodded her head. Song Huangmei held his chest with one hand and his abdomen with the other. He entered the room and sat down. Li Fusion asked worriedly, what's wrong? Song Huangmei said mysteriously, it's nothing. Didn't we see those people full of killing intent earlier? I personally went to test them. Guess what, I was taught a lesson by them. That's nothing. What happened to Iron Cliff was strange. They were not even able to draw their swords. Those people are definitely experts. Li Fusion asked with a panicked expression, does your father know about this? Song Huangmei shook his head and said, not yet. When I'm not in such a sorry state, I'll go and ask. Otherwise, my father will definitely ground me for half a month. I might not even be able to go to the lantern market. Li Fujian, who wanted to continue hiding the truth, grabbed Song Huangmei's hand and blurted out, "The person in the lead is surnamed Su. He's the current general of Lingzhou." Song Huangmei was dumbfounded. He then shook his head and smiled, "No way. Where did Su get his killing intent from? Him? Even if he wears a Bailiang sword, he's just an embroidered pillow. Impossible. If that person is Su Fengnian, then I'm a female sword immortal." Song Yen stood behind the three of them and inadvertently heard this. For the first time, he was furious at his daughter. He said angrily, "Song Huangmei, fine, fine, fine. You're a female sword immortal, right? You'll be grounded for a year. If you dare to go out, I'll break your legs. This time, I'll do what I say." Song Huangmei shrunk her neck and asked softly, "Father, is it really that Su guy?" Song Yen said sternly, "What Su guy? It's His Royal Highness." It was the first time Song Huangmei saw her father scold someone with such a stern face. She did not even feel wronged when she was beaten by Hong Shuwen. Now, she was so wronged that tears welled up in her eyes. She sobbed and shouted angrily, "It's that Su guy. Even if he's standing in front of me, I'll still call him Su. He's an ignorant and incompetent second generation. If he wasn't born into a good family and followed the general's surname Su, then what is he, Su Fengnian?" Outside the door, the housekeeper of the Song residence wished he could dig a hole and hide in it. He swallowed his saliva and turned his neck stiffly. He looked at the Su guy, who had left and returned. He did not know how to fix the situation for his young miss. Song Yen saw his daughter suddenly stop crying. He realized the change behind him. After he turned around, even the governor who had experienced the storms of officialdom felt his heart turn to ashes.